Today, I want to tell you a story, and to do that, we have to go back to the very beginning, which is 4.5 years ago. That's when I started making solo challenge videos on this channel. I can't believe I have spent nearly a half-decade of my life doing this. And so recently, I've been contemplating the question, why? Why day after day do I sit down and play solo runs of Pokemon games in a way many people would describe as tedious and laborious? Well, I can say for one, I love these games. I grew up playing them, and there's a ton of nostalgia in especially the first 3 generations. On some level, a small child inside of me is living out his fantasy of being a Pokemon master. This is literally my job. I also really enjoy playing these solo runs. It's a great way to explore something in depth in a way that I wouldn't do in a regular casual solo playthrough of a Pokemon game. But I still don't think that's exactly why I keep coming back over and over again. Maybe you've got a sense for why I do this to myself, but I assume you don't. You're not inside my brain. And I'm not inside yours. So that leads me to another question. Why do you keep coming back week after week to watch me solo run Pokemon games? Well, for this one, I think there's some fairly simple surface level reasons, and those I was aware of even when I started watching this kind of content from the likes of JRose11 and Madrybread way back in the day. I think way back in the day is starting to become a fair statement because after all, it is roughly half a decade ago. Anyways, I was aware of the fact that I wanted to watch someone else go through something that seemed kind of painful that I likely wouldn't want to subject myself to. Can someone beat Pokemon Yellow using only a Magikarp? I want to find out. I don't necessarily want to try that myself. Well, if we're being really honest, that's Scott from 5 years ago talking. Now I do want to try that, and I actually have. Another surface reason to watch this kind of content is it's just nice to have someone on in the background while you do other things. For example, folding laundry, cleaning your house. These tasks are generally just really unsavory. It's nice to have someone talking about Pokemon in the background while you accomplish them. So I assume some of you are here to see the first of these things. You want to see how painful Camerupt is in Pokemon Emerald. It's a fire ground type, and it takes 4 times damage from water types, and there is too much water in Hoenn. And in Emerald, it's even worse than it was in Ruby and Sapphire, because Wallace is no longer the 8th gym leader. They replaced him with Juan and made Wallace the champion, making things even more difficult for fire types. I assume another group of you is here for the second reason. You're here to hear me talk for a little bit. It doesn't really matter what exactly I'm saying. You just want to do something else and have someone on in the background. People have told me I have a relaxing voice, so you're welcome. If you enjoy my stuff in this way, consider liking the video and taking one moment out of whatever task you're doing just to press a button. It does help me out in the YouTube algorithm. I think there's one more surface reason to watch this kind of content. You literally just want to see which Pokemon is better. And that makes sense because that's how I've structured this entire series. When I sat down and I looked at the Pokemon Emerald Pokedex, I immediately noticed that there were so many pairings in these games. Swellow and Pelipper, Camerupt and Sharpedo, Dusclops and Bayonet. The developers clearly put a lot of thought into this Pokedex specifically and how it was designed for 2 versions. So whenever I pair Pokemon up in these series, I'm not necessarily trying to think which Pokemon would be competitively best against each other and give us the closest possible match. I'm just trying to take designs that seem like they were implemented as complements to each other, put them up against each other and see which one's better. After all, in a playthrough, it's typical that I'm going to pick between one of these 2 Pokemon. Do I want Lunatone or Solrock on my team? I need to choose one, or I need to choose a version where I can obtain one of these Pokemon. So if there's some kind of player choice, I should uncover the facts that will let you make that choice in a more informed way. And solo running is a great format to display how Pokemon fare throughout the entire playthrough because we get to see them go up against every single challenge in a run. However, sometimes you're going to click on a video like this and it's pretty obvious who's going to win. Like, Sharpedo is going to win. It's the water type. I cannot imagine it losing. So that brings us back to this idea of why do you watch? Why do I make these videos? If it's obvious Sharpedo is better, then just choose the game that gives you Sharpedo and you're done. And that leads me to what I think are the slightly deeper reasons why you come back over and over again to this kind of content. Because sometimes surprising things happen. Not all the time, but sometimes. And there are multiple ways in which surprises can play out in these solo runs. Sometimes it's a gimmick, like a shiny shows up in one of the runs and that's really hype. Other times I get to use moves that are fundamentally awful in some games, like for example Rage in Generation 1. What a terrible move. It actually gets a little bit better starting in Generation 2 and then even better in Generation 3, but overall it's not a move I use a lot. Another move like that is Skull Bash, which I have not yet used once on the channel. I wonder if it will ever get used. So I become curious about this. Maybe one day Skullbash is going to make an appearance in a playthrough and actually help a Pokemon out. I don't know when that day is going to happen, but I really want to keep doing solo challenges in anticipation of something like that happening. Earlier this year, we had moves like Roar show up and become useful in Generation 2. That was so exciting. Like, I literally have what StarCraft commentator Artosis calls nerd chills thinking about it right now. These moments are what keep me doing this. I know that unexpected things will happen and unique stuff is going to get discovered if I just keep digging deeper. So, week after week, I sit here and I do solo challenges, waiting for great stories to tell. Sometimes I tell generic stories with curse, protect, and return. Other times I get to tell stories like what I have in store for you today. So, without further ado, this is what happened when I played the game with Camerupt and Sharpedo. Okay, we need to go over all the basics to get this video started. Before I do that though, I just want to say these two are not technically version exclusives, and they aren't really complements of each other than the fact that they're the aces of the leaders' teams in Ruby and Sapphire. Maxie, of course, has a Camerupt and Archie has a Sharpedo. That's why these two have always been a pairing in my mind. Although if we look at how they're designed, the developers didn't really want to make them a strict pairing. Camerupt is a fire ground type with a medium fast growth rate. For base stats, it has 70 HP in defense, 100 attack, 105 special attack, 40 speed, and 75 special defense. So it's a slow balanced attacker with a slight bias towards special attack. In Generation 3, fire moves are all special and ground moves are all physical, so it's great that it's balanced. The downside is its typing. It has a 4 times weakness to water moves, which I've mentioned before, and it's gonna come back later in the video. We have to beat Juan and Wallace. For an ability, Camerupt has Magma Armor, which prevents it from being frozen. It's kind of a nice benefit for a fire ground type to have since it gets hit neutrally by ice type moves, but overall it's not going to impact this run very much. I don't have to hatch eggs after all. I forgot one thing here before we move on from Camerupt. Its base stat total is 460, which is relevant because it has the same base stat total as Sharpedo. The stats are just distributed very differently. Sharpedo has 70 HP, 120 attack, 95 special attack, 40 defense and special defense, and 95 speed. So it's a faster Pokemon that isn't quite as balanced. It definitely has a stronger bias towards its physical attack away from its special attack, which is a little bit disappointing because it's a water dark type. Both typings which are special in Generation 3. That said, I'm going to have powerful normal type moves like Return to make use of throughout the playthrough. Sharpedo's ability is a little bit better, Rough Skin, which inflicts damage whenever an opponent makes contact. Now, this is where things get really perplexing. They have the same base stat totals, they are shared in terms of utilization as enemy leaders' aces, but they don't have the same growth rate. Camerupt got lucky with medium fast, but Sharpedo has the slow growth rate. Why, Game Freak? I don't understand. This doesn't make any sense to me. For now, I'm going to switch away from Sharpedo and back to Camerupt because I want to go through the early game with it. Starting out, I have access to 4 moves: Growl, Tackle, Ember, and Magnitude. The first 3 are self-explanatory, but the last one deserves a little bit of an explanation. Magnitude rolls a number between 4 and 10, and each one of these numbers corresponds to a specific base power. From Generation 2 to 4, this power ranges from 10 to 150, with the minimum and maximum rolls only having a 5% probability. If you look on Bulbapedia, it says that the average power of Magnitude is 71, so right in the middle, Magnitude 7. Whenever I'm going to show you damage ranges throughout this video for Magnitude, it's always going to be calculated off of base 70 power, so that's Magnitude 7. Just know that going forward. Also, sometimes this move is going to roll lower numbers and then not get the number of turns to knock out that I wanted. That's just a part about using this move. It's a little bit random. And in other cases, it's going to one-shot Pokemon when it really shouldn't if it rolls Magnitude 9 or 10. One other small factor of this move is that its power is doubled whenever a Pokemon is using Dig. In this case, that's not going to be relevant because I don't think any of the enemy Pokemon have Dig on their movesets. At least none do that I face in regular solo challenges. Okay, so the early game for Camerupt is actually quite easy. Ember is fantastic against bug-type Pokemon, and Magnitude is basically great against everything else. There are some exceptions to this, like Lotad, which is a water grass type. I don't really have anything good to hit it with, but it's not super relevant. The Lotads are pretty terrible early on. Luckily for me, the first gym leader is Roxanne, and of course Camerupt's not going to have any problems because it's a ground type with a ground type move. Her first Pokemon is Geodude. I roll Magnitude 5 and fail to one-hit even after a critical hit. So if you were wondering how bad Magnitude 4, 5, and 6 are, about this bad. They're really not good. Luckily when I roll a better number, I just one-shot the Geodude. After this is Nose Pass. Because of my speed with Camerupt, which is quite low, I only had to tank one Rock Tomb. From there, the Nose Pass isn't going to choose this move anymore because it's a speed control move. It's not trying to lower my speed anymore, so it goes for its other moves, which are Block, Harden, and Tackle. All trash. As a result, I have the time I need to slowly chip away at it and knock it out with Magnitude 9. Actually, that's what you would expect, but no, it survives the Magnitude 9 on a sliver of health, and I have to get in one more critical hit to knock it out. I really hate it when Pokemon crit when my enemy is on like a tiny sliver of health. It's always so frustrating. I want the crits at the beginning of the battle, please. Actually, a small caveat here, provided the fact that I get a magnitude greater than 5. Okay, Sharpedo's next, and this one's a little bit weird. Its starting moveset is Bite, Leer, Rage, and Focus Energy. Honestly, a pretty terrible set. At least it gets the same type attack bonus with Bite, but this move is special, so it doesn't utilize Sharpedo's higher attacking stat. It has a 30% chance to flinch, which is nice, and Focus Energy works as is intended in Generation 3, unlike in Generation 1. Of course, Leer lowers defense, so that's not useful in combination with Bite, but it is useful in combination with Rage. But this move has a base 20 power, and it's basically useless in yellow version. After selecting the move, it just starts attacking and you can never do anything else. You can't open your bag, you can't run from the battle, you just have to wait until the enemy faints or your Pokemon faints. It is incredibly frustrating, especially when Onix versus Onix start using Rage. Then you basically have to shut off your Game Boy or be completely obsessive in order to get through the battle. I am the obsessive type though, I play solo challenges over and over again, so I did make it through a battle like this in my childhood. But Game Freak clearly realized it wasn't going to be good for the health of the game for Rage to continue functioning like this. So starting in Generation 2, they changed it. Now whenever you're using Rage, you can switch out of using the move. But while you're using it, if your Pokemon gets hit, then a Rage counter will increment. This counter is used to multiply the damage of the move. So say you've been hit 3 times while using Rage, then your damage is going to be multiplied by 3. Honestly, it's a pretty good move in Generation 2, especially in the early game. If you want to see it in action, check out my 2 videos on Dunsparce. In Generation 3 though, they once again decided that this move needs a change. So now when you're consecutively using Rage, if you get hit, your attack stat goes up by 1 stage. So if my attack is 100 and then I get my stage increased by 1, it'll go up to 150. This means I am not getting a 2 times multiple on my damage, meaning Rage was nerfed between Generation 2 and 3. And getting an attack boost is not useful for Sharpedo because I only have special moves that are good. Like, yeah, I could use Rage with base 20 power, but that's not good for the early game. Roxanne is first. I want to use special moves against her. As you can see here, I did some training with my Sharpedo. By the way, I contemplated releasing this video in Halloween month because I did nickname my Sharpedo Jaws, but it just ended up not really fitting with the other content that I wanted to put out. Plus, Camerupt is not really that Halloween themed. Like, it is scary. I have to fight water types, and my wife does like some terrible volcano disaster movies from the 2000s or 90s. I haven't seen them yet, but I have seen clips, and they look really bad. Anyways, getting back on track, I fight Roxanne, and this does not go Sharpedo's way. I have to take a blackout this early into the run. So, leveling up with the slow growth rate in the early game is such a slog. The obvious choice is to level up over the next damage rounding threshold at 13. I was hoping this would give me one-shots against the Geodude, but only the first one goes down and the second one survives. My higher speed stat when compared with Camerupt is actually a liability here because her Pokemon are more likely to use Rock Tomb longer into the battle. Luckily, the slow growth rate is holding me back from leveling up more, so I only take 2 hits from Rock Tomb before my speed is under the nose passes and it starts using bad moves. Now you should recognize that if it sees it can get a knockout with Rock Tomb, it will use this move again. So occasional chip damage from Tackle is actually a little bit scary. And this move is also scary when it gets a critical hit, bringing Sharpedo down to 5 hit points. Okay, it's definitely going to go for Rock Tomb again, which is actually probably better now so that it doesn't use Tackle, which is more accurate. It feels ironic to me. I spend a lot of time narrating how Rock Tomb would be scary, then it uses Tackle crits, and now Tackle is the more scary move. Still though, I got the nose pass low enough, so with 1 more bite, I finish it off and earn myself the first badge. This one gives a 10% boost to my Pokemon's attack stat. This is another part of cruel irony for Sharpedo. A boost to its attack stat is fantastic, but not at this section of the game. And that also leads me to the nature I've chosen for this Pokemon, which is Brave, increasing its attack and lowering its speed. Earlier in the year, I clearly demonstrated in my Spin to playthrough that Emerald doesn't require high speed stats for solo playthroughs. In general, I think speed lowering natures are actually the best to go for, unless your speed is somewhere in the range of like 60 to 70. Then you might want to leave your speed neutral, and if you're under that, maybe a speed boosting nature would be helpful. Sharpedo is more than fast enough, and I do get access to a move that does utilize its attack stat now. Although that's Rock Tomb. An absolutely terrible move, which I really hate using. And the bad news for this thing just continues, because the next gym leader is Brawly, a fighting type specialist who is super effective against dark type Pokemon, and once I beat him, there is the most difficult gym leader in all of Hoenn, Watson, the electric type specialist. Okay, so Brawly, you can skip him until after you defeat Flannery. In order to gain access to Norman's gym, you need 5 badges. I am gonna do that today. It doesn't make any sense to battle him right now with Sharpedo. Because of my slow growth rate, I'm only level 15 when I arrive on Slateport Beach. I'm going to do some training now, but we'll keep the move pool up on the screen while I do this so we can go through the moves that Sharpedo learns through TM and HM. I'm picking up the Soft Sand here because it does get access to Earthquake. Outside of that, it's kind of the generic stuff you would expect from a Water Dark type. It gets water moves, ice moves, normal moves, and one dark move, which is Thief. I am going to pick this up fairly soon inside the museum. One frustration with water types is fighting other water types when you don't have super effective damage. So today I tried to solve this problem, giving Sharpedo Hidden Power Electric. It's at least going to be helpful against Wallace's Gyarados later into the game. Maybe that'll be its only niche. Honestly, I'm not sure water types really need hidden power in these solo challenges. Water and ice moves together give fantastic coverage, and the fact that Sharpedo's mostly going to be relying on physical normal moves means that it's probably not going to need electric coverage. I think going into my second playthrough, this is the move that I'll have the most flexibility with. Maybe from the experience of this first run, I'll figure out which typing is far more ideal. I do extensive training in this area, arriving at the rival fight at level 21. For Sharpedo, he has a Grovyle. It's not that hard to beat though, because Bite is able to 2-hit. Well, after it uses Absorb, it just barely survives and gets to attack again. I live on 6 hit points and knock out his ace. Last is Wingull. I was a little bit worried about it, but then I level up to 22, getting Crunch, a fantastic same type attack bonus dark type move. With it, I'm able to one-shot the Wingull and make my way into Mauville City. Okay, time for more extensive training. There is no way that I'm going to beat Watson at this level. Let's go through what my options are. Number 1, I can just level up until I hit the damage rounding threshold where I'm getting good damage rolls against all of his Pokemon. I didn't have a good intuitive sense of where that would be, but I think somewhere around level 30, 33, or 35. Another thing I can do is head west into the cave and pick up the black glasses. Of course, boosting my dark type moves will give me a little bit more damage and maybe make the Magneton a 2-hit at a slightly lower level. Still though, with the slow growth rate, by the time I'm wanting to fight Watson, I'm only level 27. I decided to try it at this level just to see if maybe it would be possible. Watson leads with Voltorb. I go for Crunch and one-shot. Okay, good so far. Note that Sharpedo has enough speed to move first against all of his remaining Pokemon. The Electric can only paralyze if I make contact with it, which I'm going to have to do with Crunch, but I'm going to take one turn first to set up Focus Energy just to get a higher critical hit chance. And this does pay off. While I burn my Cherry Berry on the Electric, Manectric comes out next, and I one-shot due to a crit. Static didn't activate here, so I make it to the Magneton with full health. The unfortunate thing is, I'm not doing half. Roughly 1/3. Magneton prioritizes paralyzing Sharpedo, then hits with a massive shockwave, bringing me down to orange health. Watson uses a super potion, and hopes of winning this battle fade away. I tried again and the Manectric paralyzes me, so things aren't working out here. I briefly contemplated maybe Screech could help, but remember, Crunch is a special damaging move. It does lower special defense, which is fantastic, although I would have to get that 20% chance against the Magneton and then follow up with a Crunch that does enough damage to knock it out. And that's just not happening. So I think the solution here is training up to a higher level. 28 is over the next damage rounding threshold, but this strategy just isn't working. I switch it up after 2 more losses and try the black glasses, but the increase in damage isn't significant enough. While I was in Slateport City, I could have used the move tutor to teach Sharpedo Swagger, which I could then use to confuse his Pokemon and hopefully get through with that kind of luck, but I don't want to backtrack all the way to Slateport City and waste that time right now. Plus, Swagger in general is just not very consistent. 90% accuracy and only a 50% chance to inflict damage with confusion. I continue fighting trainers up to level 30 and then I return to battle Watson. This is still going awful. I get reset after reset after reset. And I think this is where we need to evaluate my choices here. Is resetting the best thing to do? It is quite fast to black out to Watson and then just walk back into his gym, defeat 3 more Pokemon, or sometimes 2 if I get unlucky. Then I'll gain experience and Sharpedo will be slowly leveling up. Plus I am constantly rolling the dice for things like crits or special defense drops. So I deposit my HM users and then begin to blackout train on Watson. Now this strategy is actually pretty good because I'm using focus energy on Watson, so I have a higher chance to crit. And I get one against Manectric after only 2 blackouts. Then on the Magneton, my first hit isn't a crit, but my second one is. And at long last, Watson is defeated. This was pretty rough, honestly. Now Camerupt on the other hand is not going to struggle against Watson. Everything it's afraid of is in the later stages of the game. Well, at least that's what I assumed when I went into this challenge. It turns out that Brawly immediately after Roxanne causes some problems for Camerupt. This is the first surprise in the playthrough for me. I wasn't expecting to have problems here, but let me go through the reasons why. The early game is very easy for Camerupt because of its type coverage, so it arrives here under-leveled even though it has the superior growth rate when compared with Sharpedo. With Sharpedo it was obvious that I should be skipping Brawly due to its typing, but with Camerupt that wasn't obvious. So I went into the battle expecting to do fine, but then I roll some bad magnitudes. Magnitude 6, hilariously with another critical hit on the first turn, knocking the Machop out. Next is Meditite, which won't be able to damage me, but the Makuhita is where all the problems come. Even with Magnitude 7, I don't have enough damage to one-shot, only taking it to orange health. Then it crits with Vital Throw, eats its Citrus Berry, I roll Magnitude 4, hilariously getting another critical hit. But of course it's not enough to win, and Vital Throw finishes Camerupt on the next turn. As you can see, this loss isn't always going to play out this way. I could go into the battle and roll better magnitudes and just crush Brawly, or I could roll worse versions of magnitude, which is what happens in the next fight. Okay, let's look at this Meditite. Somehow I get magnitude 8 and score another critical hit. I feel like Camerupt has been getting way too many of these today. Anyways, this time magnitude 10 on the Makuhita, and that's what I need to take the victory. Before taking on the rival, I do some training, bringing Camerupt up to level 23. This battle is the first early game trainer that I was really worried about because technically he has 2 water type Pokemon, Lombre and Marshtomp. Luckily the Lombre does not know any water type moves, so it's not going to do 4 times damage. It also might seem strange that I'm choosing Magnitude, but on average this move will be better than Rock Tomb, Tackle, and Ember against the Lombre. Next he sends in his Marshtomp, and here I need to pray that I get a good Magnitude, and I do, 8. But this is not enough to one-shot. It survives on a sliver of health, uses Water Gun, and brings Camerupt down to a similar amount. Luckily I get one more hit in, even though it's Magnitude 6, it's still enough. Slugma's his final Pokemon, and this thing, as you know, is trash, so I finish it off and move on to Mauville City. I did some training on the mandatory people around the gym. Specifically, I want to draw your attention to this Aroma lady. Her Roselias both give special attack EVs, which are quite rare in the early game of Pokemon Emerald. So fighting her as soon as possible tends to benefit the remainder of the playthrough. Also, just in general with Pokemon that want special attack, I have stopped skipping the Roselia people because of these EVs. At least right now though, my attack is a little bit nicer than my special attack, and for Watson I'm mostly going to be a physical attacker. Camerupt has 38 speed in this fight, so it is only faster than the electric. Everything else is going to move first. That doesn't matter against the Voltorb though, because it's using Rollout. I taught Focus Energy in the place of Tackle before this battle, so I can set it up and hopefully get some critical hits during this fight, like every other gym leader I've had so far. I get Magnitude 10 on the Voltorb, so bye-bye. Next is Electric, Magnitude 5, but it's still enough. Alright, time for Magneton. It takes 4 times damage from ground type moves. Magnitude 7 is more than enough to finish it. That leaves only the Manectric, and its best move against Camerupt is Quick Attack, which is quite weak. I snap out of confusion, hit with Magnitude 4, it does pathetic damage. Then Magnitude 5, but Focus Energy comes through for me, giving a critical hit, and that's all I need. With Watson's badge, I now get a boost to my speed stat, and this is where I should talk about Camerupt's nature. I've gone with Naive. This boosts speed and lowers special defense. I figured I'm gonna lose to water type moves anyways, so why would I need more special defense? I want physical defense later into the game for Steven Stone, and I want speed to ensure that I move first against all of the critical Pokemon. By the way, natures are incredibly important for Camerupt, and I'm gonna discuss this choice at length throughout the remaining sections of the video. For now though, my speed is getting 2 separate boosts, the badge boost and the nature boost. And along the way when I'm fighting random people like this Magma Grunt who has a Zubat, I'm also collecting speed EVs. The AI Pokemon all have 0 in every single one of their EVs, so this is a metric that they don't have access to, which will give my Camerupt an advantage. A lot of time in these solo challenges, being able to see your stats in real time causes some confusion when a slow camel Pokemon goes up against a dragon and it happens to be faster. So if later on you're wondering why Camerupt is faster than some Pokemon, these are the factors why. I have both planned and the game is biased towards giving the speed advantage to the player. Okay, up next is Maxie, and this is another surprise. Mightyena is his first Pokemon and it lowers my attack with Intimidate, which means Magnitude when it rolls its average damage isn't doing half. As a fire type in the early game, I only have access to Ember at this point. Now, some of you will mention the fact that I could have bought Flamethrower by now. And yes, I could have, but I wasn't planning around doing that in this playthrough, so I don't have quite enough money yet. It is possible in general, though, to buy 1 TM from the game corner before this battle specifically. I have not yet found a way to buy one before Watson, even if I'm using Thief to steal the nuggets on the Rich Trainers teams. If you are unaware, there are 4 Rich Trainers in the early games that have Zigzagoons which are holding nuggets. Kind of a neat little Easter egg, and it's sometimes useful if your solo Pokemon can learn Thief. But of course that strategy isn't relevant for Camerupt, but it is a possibility with Sharpedo. Okay, back to the fight. I move on to his Camerupt, and I thought I was going to be okay here. I can't use Dig because then it'll hit me for double damage with Magnitude, and that's just not good. So I am stuck here rolling the Magnitude dice, hoping for good damage rolls. I get 7, miss because of Sand Attack, and then get 6, which does more than half, but not enough for a 1-hit. His Camerupt then rolls Magnitude 8 and knocks mine out. Okay, this wasn't the worst fight ever. I use Ember in the next battle, trying to knock out the Mightyena faster, but it doesn't really do a better job. I end up with -2 accuracy before I move on to the Camerupt. I get Magnitude 4. This move is really annoying to use, by the way. And then his Camerupt gets Magnitude 9 and a critical hit. It's always a bit weird when this fight is difficult. As a kid, I never had problems here. His team always felt kind of like a joke, like previous evil team leaders in the series. But now, as an adult, this battle's actually pretty challenging for more Pokemon than I would expect. That said, this one is all coming down to luck. Provided I get the Magnitude rolls I need, like Magnitude 9, I'm gonna knock out his ace. Last is Zubat, and Rock Tomb takes care of it. Some delicious speed EVs. With Maxie out of the way, now let's face Flannery. I still think using Magnitude is the better choice here. Dig takes multiple turns, and its base power was massively nerfed going from Generation 1 into Generation 2. As a base 60 power move, on average, Magnitude will roll better damage. So I just keep using this move. I one-shot her first 3 Pokemon and move on to the Torkoal. Magnitude 5 does about a quarter, then I roll Magnitude 7, just barely failing to get the knockout. Here's the thing about her AI though. It's checking to see which move does the most damage, and it wants to avoid using Overheat unless it sees that it can get a knockout. So you can see the Torkoal is just spamming Body Slam. One of the main tools that Flannery has that we don't really see in my solo challenges is the fact that this Torkoal knows the move Attract. If Overheat wasn't doing enough damage, it would probably use that move if my Pokemon was male. But when I start these challenges with gendered Pokemon, I always pick female Pokemon just to ensure that she can't use Attract against me. Plus, it opens up Attract strategies against Steven Stone in the final battle since all of his gendered Pokemon are male. Body Slam is really not doing enough damage. I get Magnitude 9 after a Hyper Potion, bringing Torkoal back down to red health, and from there I seal the deal with 1 more hit. Okay, let's talk about Flamethrower. I said before I just barely didn't have enough money, and this is kind of true. I could sell a bunch of items and get more money, but as you can see here when I open my bag, I only have enough money to buy 500 coins. The reason for this is that I have a habit of buying all my Super Repels in Fall Arbor Town or in Lava Ridge Town, 2 places that come just before this area, and typically I spend around 20,000 coins buying 41 Super Repels. The reason for 41 is because if you press sideways on the D-pad, it increments by 10s, leaving the original 1 quantity in place. So 4 clicks to the side gets me up to 41, and then I just press A to buy the quantity. From what I can tell from the footage, it looks like I fell victim to my habits here and purchased the Super Repels, even though I really should have been trying to save towards Flamethrower. Oh well, hopefully I'm not going to need it in the next section of the game. I level up and I have a chance to learn Amnesia. This move can be helpful, especially against water types, to improve my special defense, which is another reason lowering it with my nature is not a big deal. Although for now, I don't think this move is going to be relevant. I backtrack through the middle of the map and head into Norman's gym to take on the 5th gym leader. Okay, I haven't talked about Norman at all in this video, and That's because I wasn't really thinking about him. Camerupt has Dig, which is going to allow me to play around the slacking very easily. Unless I run out of power points before knocking it out, which doesn't seem possible, I should just be able to win here fairly easily. Unless the Spinda gets really annoying, confusing me, I have the Soft Sand to increase my damage. I didn't think I needed a Persimberry. Maybe I was wrong because I keep rolling terrible magnitudes. Eventually, I knock out his lead Pokemon and move on to his second choice, which is Vigoroth. It hits with Slash, taking me down to lowish health, and then Magnitude is just not enough to finish off his second Pokemon, only rolling Magnitude 6. Another Slash does it, and I take my first reset here. Okay, let's fight some trainers in the gym. There's this guy with a Slack Off, not really good experience. There's this guy with a Swellow, that's better experience. And then there's Cool Trainer Parker, who has a Spinda. And yeah, it confuses Camerupt, and I just hit myself over and over again. And yeah, the Spinda gets me. So I have to reset before Norman, giving up all of that experience. Really frustrating. I hate when things like this happen. Now, I could have blacked out to the Spinda, but I actually think that might be slower since Spinda is not particularly good offensively. Maybe instead of leveling up, I can try an alternate strategy. I very rarely use the TM that Flannery gives you, which is Overheat. What if this is the solution for Norman that I need? I wanted to see if I could lower my special attack by 1 stage and still knock out the Vigoroth, but I can't. So while this does enable me to consistently one-shot the Spinda, from there I'm gonna have to 2-hit. I pull it off with Magnitude, and instead of his slacking, he sends in Linoon next, which I guess is good. I get to find out fast that this thing is going to defeat Camerupt. Okay, here's an alternative. Get a good roll with Magnitude on the Spinda, one-shot, then overheat the Vigoroth. Move on to the Linoon, which likes to use Belly Drum first turn. Because I'm slow, I figured I could squeeze in one attack and just finish it off. With the Charcoal, I go for Ember. This is not a good choice. It survives, and now its attack stat is maxed. Luckily for me, I get a burn, halving its physical damage, and then Norman uses a Hyper Potion, and my next Magnitude rolls Magnitude 7, bringing it back down to low health. I do sustain damage from Slash, but it's not enough to end the battle. Last is Slacking. Okay, maybe I can do this with Dig, but then on its first turn in battle, it outspeeds because, of course, Slacking is fast. It uses Facade, and Camerupt faints. I'm able to make it to the Slacking in my next battle, but again I'm at orange health, so its Facade is able to knock me out. This is not a good situation. I didn't expect Camerupt to get walled at Norman when it has access to Dig. This feels like the move that just solves his team. Ordinarily in these solo playthroughs, all I'm thinking about is the Slacking as his ace, or the Spinda getting some RNG-based win with Teeter Dance. I guess it was wrong for me to write off his other two Pokemon, Vigoroth and Linoon in this case, when I'm slower than them. Okay, let's do some training against the Slack-Off guy. His name is Cool Trainer George, and I can't believe this. Magnitude 7 doesn't get a one-hit. Slack-Off uses Counter, does massive damage, and Camerupt faints. Okay, let's pause for a brief moment. Things are not going well for Camerupt. This isn't what I expected. I thought that it might have some problems due to speed, but I didn't think they would be this extensive. And Norman just came out of nowhere and caused some serious trauma. Plus, apparently the trainers in his gym are just too much to train against, I guess. Okay, resume. I come back. I defeat the Slack-Off using Overheat so that it can't counter this move. Plus, if I one-shot, it doesn't matter. After defeating everyone in the gym, I'm only level 32. What this means is to get good experience yields, I'm gonna have to backtrack through the center of the map because I don't have access to Surf. And Mr. Briny's boat does not move with you when you walk around on the land. If you teleport, it does to avoid soft locks, but not when you walk, so time to do some annoying backtracking. I do the majority of my training north of Mauville City. This is where I skipped a bunch of trainers, so I'm going to revisit this area. In my next playthrough, it seems obvious that Camerupt needs to level up more before it takes on Norman. Luckily for me, I'm not grinding blind, looking for damage ranges with the moves that I currently have. Once I make it to level 37, Camerupt can learn Earthquake, which I'm going to teach in the place of Magnitude. Good riddance. Now I have consistent and powerful damage rolls with a ground type move. Okay, let's talk about surprises. Surprises are when you expect something and then you get something else. So I expected Earthquake win against Norman, and I got surprised. Turns out the Slacking with its only turn in battle, instead of attacking with Facade, chooses Yawn. As a result of this, Camerupt goes to sleep, and he takes a win again. Okay, next battle I come back with a Chesto Berry to avoid this kind of loss. However, then Facade gets a critical hit, bringing Camerupt down to 6 hit points. This is not good. Okay, so is there a way for me to lose here if I have Dig on my set? Well, Norman uses a Hyper Potion, replacing replacing the turn that Slacking would have attacked, so I continue using Earthquake while he uses more Hyper Potions. The problem is that I'm not doing enough damage to two-shot, so he is able to squeeze in one more attack and knock me out. I would have won this if I used Dig, but I didn't think I needed to because with most Pokemon you outspeed and just knock him out before he attacks. This is objectively bad play by me, so sorry about that. In the next battle, I will admit I was thrown off by the mistake that I had just made. I clicked a little bit too quickly, chose Earthquake, and then counter knocks out Camerupt. It's a little bit weird. He's been choosing Facade and Yawn. This is the time he goes for counter. Alright, fine. I also fumble in the next battle choosing Overheat and then going for Dig. This makes no sense. It should be Overheat, Earthquake, and then Dig to avoid the attack. So once again I lose to counter. Finally I figure things out, use Dig on the proper turn, avoid counter, and from there I just need to spam this move and slowly chip away at his ace. Eventually it's on low enough health. Slacking does choose Yawn, and I'm running the Soft Sand again, but because of the increased damage, Earthquake has enough, and his ace finally faints. I have earned myself the Balance Badge after a lot of difficulties due to Camerupt, and then difficulties due to my own play. This one increases my defense stat by 10%. Let's loop back around and continue with Sharpedo after Watson. This is the section of the game where it really starts to mature as a Pokemon in Emerald version. I can pick up the Secret Power TM, which is a physical normal move. Although for the time being, I'm probably going to continue using special moves because Maxie's Mightyena lowers my attack stat. Crunch is more than powerful enough to take a first attempt victory here. This brings Sharpedo up to level 33 where I teach Slash in the place of Secret Power. Okay, time to take on Flannery. This is with a water type, which has no water type moves at this point. The only one available to me would be Hidden Power Water. I don't know if that's a good choice. Anyway, I'm going to be using Crunch for the majority of her Pokemon. Luckily the Numel and the Slugma are both pushovers, they go down to one hit. I wasn't sure about the Camerupt, and no, it does survive sending up Sunny Day. Although, what's the likelihood of her using Overheat against a water type? I think it's pretty low. Torkoal comes out, Crunch does more than half, but not enough to put her in healing range, which is fantastic for me. Therefore, on the next turn, Sharpedo is able to knock it out and take an easy victory. Okay, time to backtrack through the map all the way to Petalburg City, only to realize that I forgot to do Brawly. This happens way too often. I don't want to admit just how many times I have done this. Actually, I just don't remember. It's really hard to keep track of all these statistics in my brain. We do collect a lot of data from the runs, but we don't collect this sort of thing, so there's no way for me to go back and check without watching every single run I've done in the past, and obviously that's just not going to be possible because of time. By the way, I think over the last year I have been playing around one playthrough every day. I think by the end of the year I will have done at least 365 playthroughs of Pokemon games. Although I'm not entirely sure, I will calculate this at the end of the year. I have to head back to Dewford Island now, and on my way in Slateport City I stopped by the TM shop to pick up a copy of Hidden Power. If you're not paying attention, this is the fight against him. It's really easy. I have Slash, I'm overleveled, I one-shot everything. That's it. Brawly is defeated. You have been warned. If anyone comments that I forgot Brawly, why didn't you include Brawly in the video, Scott? I did, seriously, he's right here, please just watch. It's actually okay. I understand most of you watch this kind of thing in the background. Although I am curious, if you do just watch my videos, how do you watch them? Like, do you do it with your family? Do you do it with your significant other? Do you eat a meal while you watch my videos, or do you just focus on them in their entirety? I'm really curious about this kind of thing, so put what you do when you watch my videos in the comments. Now, let's face Norman. This battle is important for Sharpedo because after it, I'm going to get access to probably the best water-type move in the game, Surf. Crunch is not able to one-hit the Spinda. Alright, not great start. I get hit by Teeter Dance, but luckily I prepared with a Persim Berry. This does leave me exposed if Slacking chooses to use Yawn right away though. But also, lacking a berry, I can use Thief to steal the Citrus Berry turn 1. Although Facade does a lot of damage to me. Alright, I wasn't expecting that much. I heal back into green health with the Citrus Berry, then I use Crunch, taking my target down to orange health. And I was surprised, I am actually able to knock the Slacking out. It survives with a Sliver, but he doesn't use a potion. Then Vigoroth comes out, Sharpedo falls asleep. I get hit by 1 and then 2 slashes, the second of which is a critical hit, so Sharpedo faints. Wait, are they both gonna have problems on Norman? It looks like they're both gonna have problems on Norman. I come into this battle spam Crunch, but this time because of Yawn I fall asleep and Slacking does far more damage. He uses a Hyper Potion, and while Crunch is able to get the knockout because special defense was lowered by 1 stage, the Vigoroth that follows survives a hit, uses Slash, brings me down to low health, but Rough Skin finishes it off. Alright, only Linoon is left. I go for Crunch, but instead of setting up Belly Drum, it uses Headbutt, and that's it. A second reset against Norman. Okay, to improve my damage damage, I can teach Return in the place of Slash. This brings up my effective power from 70 to 82. I can also give the Silk Scarf to improve this further up to 90. However, I don't want to be using physical moves every turn against the Slacking, and even when I do, it's just not doing very much damage. Once again, while I knock out his ace, I move on to the Vigoroth with low health. I can't one-shot, Facade takes me to red, and once again the Linoon gets me. Okay, so it's always the Pokemon on Norman's team that I least expect to be a problem. At least today. This is what I was talking about at the beginning of the video. I like to do these solo challenges because I get surprised. I would have never guessed that the Linoon and the Vigoroth would both be the keys to Norman's victories against Sharpedo and Camerupt. These are the interesting little nuances that I love discovering in these solo challenges. And now it's a nuance that I have to find a solution for. I hate to say it, but the solution for Sharpedo is one-shot the Spinda with Return, then get a special defense drop as early as possible against the Slacking. Once that happens, even though he's healing, I'm doing more than half, and then I can knock his ace out with ease. I make it to the Vigoroth with full health this time, and that essentially secures my victory. Return 2 hits the Vigoroth, I make it to the Linoon. I was expecting it to go for Belly Drum, but it doesn't, choosing Slash. This does decent damage, but not enough to knock me out, and finally Norman is defeated. Okay, Surf. Obviously, I'm going to teach this to Sharpedo. I had a period this year where I was really hating on this move, but that's specifically in Pokemon Yellow, where there's no move deleter, so once you teach it, you have to keep it. In Generation 3, there is a move deleter, he's in Lily Cove City, so if I need to get rid of Surf later on for a more diverse move pool, then I can always do that. I expect that that might be the case since Sharpedo might end the game as a physical attacker against Steven, although I'm not really sure. I think special moves might be better there just because of his Pokemon's typing and their stats. Now in the mid-game, there's another special move that I can learn. On the abandoned ship, I can pick up the TM for Ice Beam. This is the cruel irony of playing a Pokemon like Sharpedo. You want to have a set like Crunch, Surf, and Ice Beam, but all of those moves are special, so they don't really synergize well with Sharpedo's stats. But they do synergize well with its typing. Surf and Crunch both get the same type attack bonus. And I'm gonna keep them because they're both useful in the next section of the game. Plus I am gonna teach Ice Beam to Sharpedo because it's gonna be helpful against Winona. Swablu's first, Ice Beam, one-shots. Tropius is next, Ice Beam, one-shots. Pelipper is next. Crunch actually does damage, no Protect, but then it uses Supersonic and confuses me. Jaws hits itself and does a lot of damage. This is what happens when your attack stat is really high and your defense stat is quite low. By the way, this is also a subtle other reason that lowering your special defense with a nature is always better than lowering your physical defense, because then you're not going to hit yourself in confusion for more damage. I think this nuance is only really relevant if your Pokemon has a very high attack stat and a decently low defense stat. If your attack and defense are similar, then it's probably not going to change the damage that much. I finish off the Pelipper, move on to the Skarmory. Here I'm going to be using Surf because it's neutral. Well, I want to be using Surf, but I'm hitting myself in confusion. Sharpedo has less than half health. Surf doesn't one-hit. Skarmory hits with Aerial Ace, and Rough Skin affects it, causing her to use a Hyper Potion, but I'm able to get in 2 more Surfs. Well, 3 more Surfs because she uses more healing items. Skarmory hits 1 more time. Sharpedo survives on 4 hit points and moves on to the Altaria. This Dragon Flying type is going to take 4 times damage from Ice Beam. Remember when I said speed doesn't really matter? My Sharpedo has 97 and the Altaria has 68, so I easily move first and one-shot. I fight the rival so I can gain entrance to the department store. In here I buy myself some vitamins. Just look in the bottom left, you can see my current EVs, so special attack and physical attack have actually earned around the same number. This is slightly atypical. In most playthroughs I have gained much less special attack EVs. In this case I'm going to buy protein and use them on my attack stat, although we're going to see why this is not a great choice later in the video. Okay, Magma Hideout Maxi. Notice here I'm holding the Mystic Water. This item is available after you get the cast form from the Weather Institute. It's another one of the tragedies for water-type Pokemon. There are no water-type TMs or HMs before you defeat Norman, and then the Mystic Water comes with them. I'm not using a Person Berry here. I didn't think I would need it. Surf one-shots the Mightyena. Crobat comes out next. It does confuse me, but I still hit with Ice Beam. It doesn't do enough damage. Maxi uses a Super Potion. I snap out of confusion and then knock out his fast flying type. Last is Camerupt, but of course I have Surf. And as you can see here, the Fire Ground type gets obliterated by this move. Well, I got a critical hit, but I think my point stands. What I really wanted to do was get all of you extremely concerned about Camerupt's late game. Okay, with the 2 hideouts finished, I head into Shoal Cave and pick up the Never Multis. I also spend some time here grabbing the Shell Bell, but as of late, I have stopped picking up this item. It's just not really worth the time investment. For some context, in Generation 3, the user recovers 1/8 of the damage dealt. So if a Pokemon deals 100 damage while holding the Shell Bell, it only gains back 12 hit points. Okay, up next is Tate and Liza, and I don't expect that Sharpedo is going to have any problems against them because it's a dark type. Before that battle though, let's check in with its level. Right now it's level 44, which is on the low side. After I make it through a bunch of the gym trainers, I have gone up to level 45, but I wasn't sure if I should use rare candies right now like I do in most of my playthroughs. Tate and Liza can be scary, but not really when you're a dark type. They have very few moves that can even damage Sharpedo. That lets me make the easy decision to not use rare candies now and go into the battle at this level. Okay, so let's talk about Surf in double battles. Whenever it deals damage, it is divided between the opponents that it hits. So in this case, it will deal 50% damage to Xatu and to Claydol. You can see that here because it doesn't do very much, only just more than half to the Claydol and roughly 1/3 to the Xatu. My Zigzagoon faints and then I move on to the second turn. Because of the amount of damage I dealt, the Claydol does not get healed with a Citrus Berry or with a Hyper Potion. So I knock it out on the next turn and they send in Soul Rock. I had taken the Xatu down to orange health, but it's setting up with Calm Mind, so it's likely going to survive another hit. Unless I use Crunch, which targets a single Pokemon. I decide to go for the Soul Rock because it's going to set up Sunny Day, and it can also hit with Solar Beam, which is super effective. I get the one-shot, they send in Lunatone next. My Person Berry heals the confusion that the Xatu dealt out. I go for the Lunatone, but I don't have enough damage to knock it out, so I switch my target to the Xatu just in case they use a Hyper Potion, but the Citrus Berry prevents them from doing this. Then they put me to sleep, but here's where we need to talk about their movesets. Lunatone cannot deal damage to Dark-type Pokemon. The Solrock is by far the most scary Pokemon for Sharpedo to go up against. Xatu can use Confuse Ray, but that's it. And the Claydol has Earthquake and Ancient Power, but as you saw at the beginning of the battle, it's not a problem when I can just use Surf to two-shot. Okay, Sharpedo got an easy victory over Tate and Liza, and with their badge, it earns itself a boost to its special attack and special defense stats. Okay, we're gonna skip a bunch of irrelevant stuff and jump right into the battle with Winona using Camerupt. We need to do a quick moveset update. Earthquake, Overheat, Rock Slide, and Dig are what I currently have. I learned Rock Slide before I got access to Earthquake, but it just wasn't really relevant for the Norman battle. Here though, against a bunch of flying types, it is incredibly helpful, and I have Overheat just so I can one-shot the Skarmory. Altaria is able to set up with Dragon Dance and hit with Earthquake, doing super effective damage, but it's not enough to one-shot. I survive with half health and knock it out. Last is Tropius, and Rock Slide's gonna get a 2-hit. She slows me down with 2 Hyper Potions, but in the end it doesn't matter. For the next section of the game, I'm going to give up Dig. It's really fallen off in usefulness after Norman. I'm going to teach Hidden Power Electric. I probably should have done that before Winona. Maybe it would have been helpful. I don't know. My moveset was decent against her. Surprisingly, in the hideout, Maxie is a little bit of a problem. I get hit by Swagger and then taken down to low health on the Camerupt. When I finish it with Earthquake though, I have the chance to learn Eruption at level 45. This move is essentially a fire-type water spout. It has a formula which determines its base power. 150 times the Pokemon's current HP divided by the Pokemon's max HP. If it produces a value less than 1, then the base power becomes 1 instead. Essentially, if you're not good at math, what this means is if you're at a higher HP, you get a better base power, and if you're at a lower HP, then you get a lower base power. Because we're dividing current HP by maximum HP, this ends up being the case that if you have your maximum HP, it just becomes 1 multiplied by 150, which is 150 base power. So this move hits like a truck, especially with the same type attack bonus, and it doesn't have the same downside that a move like Overheat has. So time to let go of that move and teach Eruption in its place. This leads directly into the Tate and Liza battle because Eruption hits both opposing Pokemon. I should have gone for it first turn. I don't know what I was thinking with Rock Slide. Well, actually I do know what I was thinking. I was forgetting the fact that Eruption hits both Pokemon. It's just like Water Spout. Because of this fumble, I take so much damage early into the battle and I don't even make it by their first Pokemon. I made some moveset adjustments, teaching Return in the place of Earthquake, which doesn't make a ton of sense that I teach Rest in the place of Hidden Power. I guess I can do that. In the next battle, at least I choose Eruption. It does massive damage to both their Pokemon, but they do survive and deal damage with Earthquake. Then I use Return so I finish off the Claydol, not taking more Earthquakes. Lunatone comes in next, and I don't really have a good move against it. Like, why did I teach Return? It doesn't help against rock types. I have no good moves against them now. Like, I guess Earthquake didn't do anything before because these Pokemon have Levitate or they're flying. I thought I could take my time and knock them out slowly with Rest and a Chesto Berry, maybe some Eruptions here and there. After all, the Solrock is going to set things up for me with Sunny Day. But this ends up not working and I take another reset. Okay, I've collected 13 rare candies up until this point. I think now is the time to use some. I bring Camerupt up from level 53 to level 60 before trying again. I wish I could say this went well. I continue having problems against them. I've held on to Hidden Power Electric this time so that I have damage against the rock type Pokemon, but even this doesn't work. I go back to the move tutor to relearn Amnesia so that I can set it up and take less damage from special moves. Okay, it's a little bit hard in this battle for me to communicate just how awful this was with Camerupt without me wasting your time. I lose over and over and over again. I just couldn't make this work with Amnesia and Rest at level 60, so I decided to go and do more training. By this point in the game, it's unfortunate that I'm training after using rare candies, but the medium fast growth rate is decent at leveling up in the late game. I'm able to go back and do some other errands that I didn't do until this point in the game now, so I pick up a TM for Flamethrower, but it's not going to be helpful against Tate and Liza. At level 63, I continue trying. Now Eruption is one-shotting the Xatu, and the Claydol is just barely surviving. But then they're going to use a healing item on it, and I take damage from Earthquake, so I can't do much on the next turn. This is just unfortunate. I continue to reset against them. The way I end up winning is Eruption deals less damage to the Claydol, and they don't choose to heal it. This way I can use Return to knock it out, and then I'm not taking damage from Earthquake. Now with Amnesia, I can max out my special defense, use Rest, take my time, and then slowly chip away at the rock types. This has not been fun. I did not expect to have problems here. I really thought the fact that I had Eruption would give me some kind of advantage in this battle, and then I knew that with a move like Rest, I would probably be able to just survive long enough. I really underestimated how much damage they would be able to do to me and how little I would be able to do to them. So that's another surprise for Camerupt, an unfortunate one at that. Now, it always seems like Archie is a water-type specialist. He does have a Sharpedo, so we get to see Camerupt versus Sharpedo quite literally right here. Although, mine is just over-leveled at this point. Level 64 against 43, I one-shot his ace. During this section of the game, I've relearned Earthquake, and I've also taught Flamethrower in the place of Eruption. And to ensure that I have defensive moves, especially for water types, I have kept Amnesia and Rest. Because after the plotline, right around the corner, is Juan. Okay, quickly, let's check in with speed stats. Right now, Camerupt has 118. Juan's fastest Pokemon is the Kingdra with 106, so I am easily going to move first against all of his Pokemon. This will not always be the case. We're going to get to that later. For now though, I take my time, set up Amnesia against the Love Disc, and then at +4 I decide to sweep. I one-hit the Celio, and surprisingly the Whiscash. Crawdaunt also falls to a single hit, leaving only the Kingdra. Earthquake does far more than half. Water Pulse only does a third. After Juan uses a Hyper Potion, I get to reroll damage, and while I'm not able to knock it out, he just keeps healing, and eventually I get 2 moves in a row, finishing his ace. Okay, the first Water-type threat was not an issue, and I want to let you know that Wallace's fastest Pokemon has 118 speed, so I am guaranteed to move first against all of his Pokemon as well. Things are honestly looking up for Camerupt. Maybe this is the surprise. It's going to be good against Water-type Pokemon. Well, at very least, we can say it's good against Wally, but what is that really proving? He's honestly terrible. With him defeated, I am now ready for the league with one of the Pokemon. So, we need to catch up with Sharpedo. Surprisingly, which is the theme of this video, I ran into some issues against Archie. Surf just barely doesn't one-hit the Mightyena, largely because I didn't use rare candies before Tate and Liza. Then, against the Crobat, it does some damage with Wing Attack, survives, gets a Super Potion, and Ice Beam finishes it. Last is his Sharpedo, and this is where things go wrong, because it gets a critical hit with Slash. And the only reason it's moving first is because it was hit by Scary Face after not finishing off the Mightyena in a single turn. This allows it to attack again after just barely surviving, and my Sharpedo faints. The next battle is more worrying because he lowers my speed again, and then Crobat takes me down to half health, which is not nice, because the following Sharpedo is once again going to outspeed and attack twice. However, luck is on my side, and it turns out I can roll enough damage to knock his out in only one hit, and survive the damage from Rough Skin. Okay, let's talk a little bit in depth about my choice for Hidden Power Electric. This is something I've seen people like Squidgy do in Pokemon Crystal, where they want to have a good solution to water-type Pokemon throughout the game when using a water type. I figured that would be a good choice for Sharpedo, but here against Juan, we can see why it's not really the best thing to do. I don't want to be using a special move, even if it's super effective. I would far prefer to just use a physical move like Return. Also, his team has Whiscash, so an electric move doesn't help against it. Plus, the Kingdra only takes neutral damage, so again, the physical move is better. While he would have superior effective power against Love Disc, Celio, and Crawdaunt, those aren't the Pokemon I'm really worried about. In the end, this battle is just a series of 2 hits with Return, and that's fine. Sharpedo makes it through with just under half health remaining. Luckily, no surprises with Wally. He is bad, as we would expect. So Sharpedo is now ready to take on the Elite Four, well, kind of in spirit. I think this is the moment that I should be using my rare candies. Just outside of the door, I am level 51, and I have collected a total of 14 up until this point. So I'm going to use all of them now to go up to level 65 before taking on the League. But I also have one more step of preparation. That's going back to Lily Cove City, talking to the move tutor, and learning Substitute. This move is fantastic for the Hoenn Elite Four, so let's try it out. Sydney's up first, and notice I am running a completely special set. I have really started to reevaluate my choice of the Brave Nature. Boosting my attack seems correct, but I've been using mostly special moves because of my type coverage, so I think it's probably better to go with a Quiet Nature to boost my special attack and lower my speed. Luckily for me against Sydney, he can't really do anything. Substitute blocks his Sand attack from Mightyena, and from there I can one-hit with Surf. I am over-leveled now, and I have a type advantage against his Cacturn and Shiftry because Ice Beam does enough damage to one-shot both of them. I don't really have a good choice for the Crawdaunt, but surprisingly I get a critical hit with Surf and one-shot anyway, leading to his Ace Absol. I use Surf, and it is another one-hit. That was a clean sweep. And I don't expect Phoebe to put up more of a fight. I have Crunch. I also get a free substitute on the first Dusclops while it tries to use Protect. From there I just crunch away, even one-shotting the Sableye, so a second easy Elite Four member. Glacia is a little bit more tricky. While I can't establish Substitute while she sets up Hail, the chip damage from the weather effect is going to accumulate past my Substitute, so it does deal damage to me every turn, slowly whittling away at Sharpedo. Of course, I'm not able to one-hit the Wall Rain using Crunch. It does just over half, and then Body Slam breaks my Substitute before I knock it out on the next turn after it uses its Citrus Berry. This leaves one Glalie against me with orange health. I establish my Substitute, which I'm not sure is the correct choice. Glalie sets up Light Screen, which is problematic. My Crunch only does 1/3, but luckily it lowers Special Defense, which is perfect. Although Glacia's last Pokemon is not able to break my Substitute on the next turn, so I think I would have got her anyways. That leads to the last member of the Elite Four, Drake, and I have Ice Beam. I don't know what you want me to tell you. This is so simple. Just spam the move, which does 4 times damage to 3 of his Pokemon. Kingdra takes 2 hits. That's okay. It doesn't matter. Beyond that, his Salamence falls easily, and I've made it to Wallace. Just before we roll the intro for him, I just want to talk about one small problem with Surf. You can delete it in Pokemon Emerald, but you can't do that during the Elite Four. So I'm gonna have to take the Water-type move in against the champion, meaning I have to choose between deleting Crunch and Ice Beam if I want Hidden Power Electric. I didn't want to have to buy another Ice Beam TM at the game corner, wasting more time before Steven Stone, so I decided to give up Crunch. Okay, now time for the intro. Let's go into Wallace. His first Pokemon is Wailord, as you will know. I set up Substitute here, but it immediately gets broken by Double Edge. Okay, maybe I should attack with Hidden Power Electric. It doesn't do enough to one-shot. I take damage from Double Edge to around half, and then Wallace uses a full restore, so I knock out his lead over the next 2 turns. I'm gaining back a small amount of health every turn with the Shell Bell here, so it is being useful. I guess this is one use case for it. Next is Ludicrolo. I hate this thing. It's so annoying. Of course, it's setting up Double Team, and Sharpedo is not able to defeat it. Okay, I think I'm making a mistake not having a physical move here, especially with my nature, so I'm going to teach my second return TM in the place of Ice Beam and then try again. I was hoping this would do much more damage to the Ludicolo. I make it to it with full health, then I set up Substitute, hoping that it was going to go for double team, but it doesn't. It just spams Giga Drain, breaking my Substitute, leaving me on orange health. And then from there, Wallace uses a full restore, and I knock it out with a critical hit return. So I made it to the Tentacruel, but I am not in a good position. I'm going to have to slowly gain back health using the Shell Bell. Now, it would be nice if I could delete Surf here and teach Earthquake so I had super effective damage against this poison type, but I can't do that. I try Substitute, hoping for it to use Toxic, but it sees my low health and uses Sludge Bomb. As a result, this is where I fail. Alright, once again, Surf is kind of being annoying. I think I should have deleted it before I tried the Elite Four. It might have made Sydney a little bit more difficult, but Crunch was enough for Phoebe, Crunch was enough for Glacia, Ice Beam was enough for Drake, and that means Surf doesn't really have a good niche. Perhaps this is changing my perspective around it as a same type attack bonus move. It's great throughout the mid-game from after Norman until just before the league, but then it should be deleted if your Pokemon has better options available. This time Ludicolo tries to set up double team and I knock it out without taking any damage, which is perfect. I use Return right away against the Tentacruel, it hits with Sludge Bomb, not doing very much, and Wallace spends a full restore trying to save it. Okay, time for Milotic. Now, it uses Toxic, wasting its time to do damage, but even if it did, it only has Surf and Ice Beam, so it wouldn't do much. I finish it, move on to the Whiscash, which he chooses next, and that's perfect. No Intimidate before it comes in. I now have the choice between Surf or Return. I go for Surf on turn 1, thinking that it's going to set up Amnesia and that I'm going to have to use Return after that, but instead I just get a critical hit. Moving on to Wallace's final Pokemon, which is Gyarados, and of course, Hidden Power Electric easily solves it. Sharpedo finishes the league with a time of 1 hour 39 minutes and 17 seconds, with 14 resets, 3 blackouts at level 68, with a game time of 5 hours and 54 minutes. It's not a great performance, it's not really that good for a fully evolved Pokemon, but for a first playthrough, it's fine, at least for now. I expect much worse things from Camerupt. Luckily, Sydney is going to be really easy. I don't expect any problems. Flamethrower is pretty good here, even against the Crawdaunt. I think I was just spamming attack a little bit too fast. That's okay. I use Earthquake on the next turn, and it doesn't do more damage, so maybe Flamethrower was the better choice after the Intimidate. I resume using the Fire-type move, one-shot the Shiftry, the Cacturn, and the Absol. Okay, Phoebe, I get a free Amnesia here. Earthquake isn't able to one-hit the Dusclops, which is annoying, but that's all it is. I crit her Ace, which is fantastic, speeding results up, and then Flamethrower one-shots the Bayonet, the Sableye, and the second Bayonet. But the Fire-type move is less useful against Glacia. The Walrein line has the ability Thick Fat, which halves the damage from Ice and Fire-type moves. You'll see this reflected in the effective power in the bottom center of the screen, so after all these calculations, Flamethrower only has an effective power of 71. This makes Earthquake the far better move to use in this case. I'm able to one-shot the Celio and two-hit the Walrein. But that's a problem, because then it's going to use Surf. So let's see how much damage it does to Camerupt. And I've already taken some damage from Hail. I was so surprised here when Surf didn't one-hit. Camerupt survives and has red health left over for the remainder of the battle. Okay, I did think that was going to be a reset, but let's keep going. I'm taking chip damage from Hail every turn, but I can use Flamethrower against the Glalie to get a one-hit. Her second Celio comes in. I almost used Flamethrower here, backing out, then choosing Earthquake, and I get another one-shot. Perfect. Okay, the final Glalie is gonna go down, so Camerupt pulls through. Now, I expected Glacia to potentially cause problems because I thought the Walrein was going to get a Surf. I kind of thought that I was going to have to black out here a little bit, train up to like level 73 maybe to get by her, but I'm happy with this result. However, Drake is next, and he's quite surprising. The issue here is not the Shelgon. I didn't heal, but I'm just going to use Rest here to recover my health. I think it's because I didn't have a healing item, honestly, or I just forgot it. It doesn't really matter. Actually, it does matter. These details are sometimes fascinating. I did have a healing item, but only one full restore. I didn't want to use it now, of course. I wanted to use it before Wallace. Okay, here's the thing about Drake that was a little bit surprising to me. I didn't think the Flygon was going to cause significant problems, but it is going to cause significant problems. It has Levitate, so he can switch into it, foiling one of my Earthquakes, and then its Earthquake is going to hit for massive damage. If I've had my speed lowered, I have no chance of moving first, and even with my speed unaltered, it was only 125 going into the battle, so Fly Flygon was going to move first. Because of that, I decided not to take a reset here and instead blackout to train up just a little bit more before I take on Drake again. Hilariously, this time I have a problem with Sydney. I didn't expect that. I missed because of Sand Attack on the Crawdaunt, and it does have Surf, but after a Swords Dance, I actually miss a second Earthquake, allowing it to use Surf, and this almost one-shots Camerupt. My next attack does not do enough to one-hit, so it takes me out with a follow-up Strength. Truly a strange battle. On my next attempt, I make it by him as well as Phoebe and move on to Glacia. I'm only level 69 here, which is not particularly nice, but I can still survive the Surf, so this battle is not a problem. I get the damage ranges I need against her final 3 Pokemon and move on to Drake. It looks like that's consistent, so I don't need to worry about her at this level. Although I think it's worth saying that if Camerupt was just a few levels lower, maybe 65, it probably would really struggle here against Glacia. Okay, so I'm level 70 now for Drake, which gives me 128 speed. I'm faster than all of his Pokemon with the exception of Salamence, which has 132 speed. It knows Rock Slide, but luckily it does not know Earthquake. Now, I'm doing something here that I don't think is the best choice in retrospect. I'm setting up with Amnesia to boost my special defense to hopefully make me take less damage throughout the battle. I don't think this makes a lot of sense, because then my speed gets lowered and I don't move first against the Flygon, which hits with Earthquake, doing more than half. As a result, I can't get a second Flamethrower in, and that's that. I white it out one more time here, coming back into the battle, this time with Return in the place of Flamethrower. Also at level 72, I have enough speed to move first against all of his Pokemon, but just to ensure that I still have good odds, I've also equipped the Quick Claw. This way, if I get my speed lowered by Rock Tomb, I can still come back. With Return and my higher speed stat, I'm able to two-shot the Flygon, taking half damage from Earthquake in the process. Next is Kingdra, and you would think that Earthquake would get a one-hit, but it doesn't, just barely. Luckily though, it's setting up with Dragon Dance, and he goes for a full restore trying to save it, giving me another chance to attack. But I still don't have the damage required, so maybe I'll always fail that range, I'm not sure. This means Kingdra gets to attack with Surf. But because I raised my special defense, Camerupt survives. I knock out the water type, move on to the Altaria, but I'm not in a good position. I go for Return, it sets up with Dragon Dance, then uses Aerial Ace. Camerupt survives at 1 hit point and knocks out his penultimate Pokemon. But his Salamence still remains. Although my speed is intact, so I can use Rest before it attacks me. This is perfect because it chooses Flamethrower, likely because any of its moves would have knocked me out. It does pathetic damage, and then it starts using Rock Slide, which is still not doing very much. I wake up and slowly get to chip away using Return, and Salamence eventually goes down to a lucky critical hit. Alright, Drake was a big surprise. I didn't expect this battle to be nearly this difficult, but it was. And that's before Wallace. Yeah, I think this is where Camerupt is about to fall apart. Look at the timer. It's already doing much worse than Sharpedo. Okay, Wailord's first, and I really want to talk about my decision making here. I'm holding the Soft Sand, and Earthquake is far more powerful, so I choose Return, hoping not to knock out the Wailord, but to bring it to low health, so that Water Spout deals very little damage. This is Wailord's only water type move. My hope was that I could eventually set up Amnesia, then use Rest and sweep his team. But Return only takes the Wailord to orange health, and Water Spout brings me down lower than the Wailord. Okay, this is not going well, so I take a quick reset here after trying one Amnesia. In the next battle, I instead choose Earthquake for more damage. This does bring Wailord to red health, so Water Spout deals much less damage. Then Steven is going to use a full restore, and I can set up with Amnesia, improving my defenses. If I now alternate to Earthquake, I can bring the Wailord back down to low health, tank the Water Spout, and then set up more with Amnesia. If he uses a full restore, I can go back to using Earthquake, but he doesn't, so I get fully set up to +6 defense. I hope that this is going to be enough. Tentacruel is next, Earthquake gets an easy one-shot, then Ludicolo comes in, I use Return doing more than half, it sets up double team, and I miss my next attack as a result. This means it gets to choose Surf, but because of my defensive setup, it really doesn't do that much. I finish it off and move on to the Whiscash. Now, I'm trying to play overly safe here using Rest, which is just not a good choice, because the Whiscash knows Earthquake, and it does a lot of damage to Camerupt. Because of Rest, I'm asleep, and I have thrown away my chances to win. I make it back to the Whiscash in the next battle, this time choosing Earthquake right away. It takes it down to red health, it sets up Amnesia, which doesn't do anything. Wallace uses some full restores trying to save it, but it doesn't matter, and eventually Earthquake gets the one-shot. Now notably in this fight, you'll see that my special defense isn't raised. I'm just trying to attack and beat all of his Pokemon as fast as possible. Maybe that's the superior strategy, but at level 73, I'm just barely not able to knock out the Milotic. Like, this is a painful damage roll. As a result, it hits with Surf. The super effective move also gets a critical hit, and Camerupt has no hope of surviving. Okay, good news. I still have rare candies in my bag, a total of 6, so I'm going to use those now to boost my level up to 78 before trying again. I'm also going to teach Hidden Power in the place of Amnesia, so that then I have a super effective special move to use against the Gyarados after its Intimidate triggers. Now, I've given up Amnesia, so I don't have the ability to set up my defenses anymore, but at the higher level, I one-shot the Wailord, so there isn't a good point for me to set up anyways. I can one-hit the Tentacruel that follows, two-hit the Ludicolo. I just need to pray that it uses Double Team, but it doesn't, instead choosing Surf, bringing my Camerupt down to red health. Now, because he didn't set up with Double Team, he's going to use full restores here, and I just slowly knock out this trolley Pokemon. It takes time, but it's good that I'm depleting his healing items. He's not going to be able to use them later into the battle. Earthquake gets lucky, one-hitting the Whiscash with a critical hit. It might have done that either way. Then Milotic comes in at the higher level. I can one-shot, moving on to the final Gyarados, and Hidden Power Electric manages it here too. Okay, Wallace wasn't actually that bad. I'm a bit surprised. Camerupt gets an Elite Four finish of 2 hours, 16 minutes, and 30 seconds with 30 resets, 2 blackouts at level 78 with a game time of 7 hours and 30 minutes. Alright, it's not going to beat Sharpedo. I think we all knew this. It's a fire ground type, like what were its chances? IGN put it best, there is too much water in these games. But all of the water is behind us. I grab the leftovers and then I head to Meteor Falls to take on Steven Stone. Okay, check out this embarrassing fight. Look at my moveset. It's so weird. Earthquake, Return, Hidden Power, Electric, and Rest. What am I thinking? I do get a critical hit on the Skarmory, which is great. Earthquake obviously one-shots the Aggron, which is next. Metagross follows. I have 146 speed. Please note that for later. And so I'm able to move first, but I'm not able to one-shot. This gives it time to use its own Earthquake, which does devastating damage. I have only red health remaining by the time I knock out his ace, but he still has 3 Pokemon. The next one is Claydol, and I can't really do good damage to it with Return, less than half, and it has Earthquake, so Camerupt faints. Okay, my moveset is atrocious, obviously. Let's go back to the move reminder and teach a fire-type move. I think Eruption might be my best bet, so I'm going to put it in the place of Return. Okay, so the fire-type move is fantastic. I one-shot the Skarmory, one-shot the Aggron, one-shot the Metagross, and move on to the Claydol. This is where everything falls apart. I fail to knock the Claydol out with a single Eruption, and so it does damage with Earthquake, lowering my damage, and as a result, I just can't knock it out after he uses a full restore. Okay, let's try an alternate strategy. What if I use Sunny Day in combination with Eruption? Then my effective powers go to truly absurd levels, like here against Skarmory where Eruption has an effective power of 742, well, until I start taking damage. I tried using Rest to heal, but this really isn't working out the way I wanted it to, so I decide to reset. In the next battle, I'm much more concise. Sunny Day, then Eruption to knock out the Skarmory. I use Earthquake on the Aggron, and then Eruption again on the Metagross. Okay, question is, will a sun-boosted Eruption have enough damage to knock out the Claydol? And the answer is no. Plus, it sets up Light Screen. This is not good. Now my Eruptions are doing even less, but I am able to finish it off because Steven used a full restore. I move on to Armaldo, but I have no more Eruptions left because my PP is small. I'm having to use Earthquake here, but it's just not enough, and Camerupt goes down again. I was close there though. I think I can do this. So Sunny Day turn 1, then Eruption on the Skarmory, Earthquake on the Aggron to save PP, Eruption on the Metagross, and then I actually roll better damage against the Claydol because I'm holding the leftovers now. This increases Eruption's damage and gives me the one-shot. I don't have to spend more of the fire-type move on it, so I can re-establish Sunny Day and then use Eruption for the Armaldo and the final Cradily. Unfortunately, the grass type only takes neutral damage because it also has the rock typing, so I'm not able to one-shot with Eruption, and then I have to use Earthquake to finish it. This takes time, but it is possible. So Camerupt clocks in with its final first playthrough time, 2 hours, 26 minutes, and 24 seconds, with 34 resets, 2 blackouts at level 79, with a game time of 7 hours and 56 minutes. Okay, Sharpedo time. Let's beat Steven Stone. I've changed up my moveset just slightly going into this battle. Hidden Power Electric, Surf, Earthquake, and Substitute for defense. I'm also holding the leftovers, so I'll gain back health throughout the battle. Surf does slightly more damage to the Skarmory when compared with Hidden Power Electric, and it does less than half. That's not good. Skarmory poisons me with Toxic and I don't have Rest, so that's a quick reset. For the next battle, I'd realized that Hidden Power Electric isn't really going to help here, so I have Ice Beam instead. Also, I know to set up Substitute turn 1 to block Toxic so that I don't get hit by the status move. There is a problem though. If the Skarmory continuously breaks my substitutes, then it's going to be able to use the move again if I choose not to set up. And as my health gets lower, the Skarmory is going to get more and more offensive, seeing the knockout. I make another misplay here going for Surf after Ice Beam. It does not have enough damage to knock out, so I get poisoned again and take another quick reset. Okay, so the way to play this is obviously Substitute, block Toxic, then use Surf to knock out the Skarmory, re-establishing Substitute as needed. Once I knock out his lead, things should get easier, right? Earthquake should be able to one-hit the Aggron, but it can't. Aggron survives. Don't worry though, its moveset is terrible. It does no Solar Beam, which is super effective and does a lot of damage. It chooses this, wasting its turn, and goes down for free anyway. Cradily is next. It's bad. It's really bad. Surf does the most damage, but it's not nearly enough. It also has Giga Drain, so it's going to be healing itself, and Sharpedo faints. Okay, so I should have Ice Beam. Let's do it again with Ice Beam. I'm making so many mistakes here with Sharpedo. Anyways, I make it back to the Cradily. This time I freeze with Ice Beam, but it just defrosts right away and knocks me out. That's really frustrating. Okay, here's some damage range stuff. I can't two-shot the Metagross. This is once I make it by the Cradily. It survives, uses Earthquake for devastating damage, Steven uses a full restore, attacks again, and Sharpedo faints. Okay, let's look at my move pool right now. Like, what possible options do I have? I don't have a good setup move to use against him. Roar was useful earlier on in Crystal version, but I don't see it having much utility here. Once I make it to the Metagross, I just don't have an option. That said, Sharpedo still has a lot of time before it gets a worse result than Camerupt, so I can do some more training even though I'm the slow growth rate. I come back at level 70 hoping for a better damage range against the Metagross, but just getting to it is difficult. I faint to the Claydol, have to reset on the Skarmory because it's just going to keep attacking. This happens twice in a row. Then I make it to the Cradily, which finishes me, and finally I get back to the Metagross. Okay, so will I have enough damage? And the answer is, yeah, I will, to two-shot, but its Earthquake does too much damage, so I don't even get the chance. I need to have Substitute in place. When I went into this challenge, I was expecting Sharpedo to not struggle against Steven Stone. I figured that the Water type in combination with a powerful move like Earthquake would be more than enough to manage him. But type coverage isn't everything. Let's quickly reflect one more time on my brave nature. In this case, it's actually helping me, because I'm using Earthquake against the Metagross. I need to have the two-shot damage range. If I went with the quiet nature, I would probably lose that until a higher level. That doesn't seem like the best thing, but extra special damage against all of his other Pokemon would help. I'm kind of caught between two bad choices here, which is disappointing. I went back to the move reminder to teach Crunch in the place of Earthquake. If you're not sure what I'm thinking here, starting in Generation 6, the Steel type does not resist the Dark type. So I was like, ooh, a Dark type move. Metagross is a Psychic type. It's going to be super effective. It's not going to be super effective. This is a terrible choice. And that puts me in a problem because I saved over this. So yeah, now I have to manage in this situation. I cannot get Earthquake back. Maybe I can use Rest instead. So Ice Beam, Surf, Substitute, and Rest. And the answer is no, this set is really not that good. So this fight has been surprising and unexpected. By the way, I once had a conductor who told the entire orchestra that he doesn't like surprises. He said, I don't want you to show up late. I don't want you to miss rehearsal. I don't like surprises, except for on my birthday and Christmas. And I relate to that today. I don't like surprises. They've all been really bad. Okay, so what is the hope for Sharpedo? Well, on the abandoned ship, I can pick up the TM for Rain Dance. Maybe boosting the damage of Surf is going to be what I need. The issue is setting it up. Where do I do that? If I'm going to set up Substitute against the Skarmory, it has a chance to break it. If that happens, then I want to re-establish Substitute to avoid Toxic, not giving me time to set up Rain Dance. So I felt like I needed to knock out the Skarmory right away, as well as the Aggron. But then I don't really want to set up Rain Dance on the Cradily either. Like, I'm not in a great position here. And I take 4 more resets trying to fit Rain Dance into my strategy. On my 5th attempt, I finally make it back to the Metagross. But unfortunately, Rain has faded by this point, so Surf is not able to do half, and I lose again. Alright, please look at the time. Yeah, Camerupt is starting to look concerning. I have bled so much time trying to solve Steven Stone using Sharpedo. I go back to Victory Road and train up to level 73. The slow growth rate is starting to become a major liability. If I was the fast growth rate, I would just level to like 80 and then stomp Steven Stone and it wouldn't be an issue. But the time required to do that with Sharpedo would be approaching astronomical levels. Okay, so here's how things I think need to go. Substitute turn 1, then 2-shot the Skarmory with Surf without it breaking my substitute. This then gives me a 1-shot with Surf against the Aggron so that it never uses one of its moves. Cradily is next. I can use Ice Beam here, and I'm hoping that it chooses either Confuse Ray, which is foiled by substitute, or it chooses Ingrain, giving itself one more turn, but also another chance to choose Confuse Ray, which is what happens here, so I still have my substitute. Next is Claydol. This is where things are a little bit tricky, so Surf does not do enough damage to 1-shot, but I can set up Rain Dance when Steven uses a full restore, and then use Surf to deal more damage. Now, while the Claydol has set up Light Screen so it's taking less from my boosted damage, the weather is still going to be around for the Metagross if I just knock it out over 2 turns, which is what I do. Now, look at how precisely this lines up. I have 2 turns of rain left. The first one I hit Metagross when it still has a Light Screen, so it does much less than half. It looks hopeless. My substitute gets broken, then Light Screen wears off, and my next Surf with the final turn of rain does massive damage, in this case because of a critical hit and Metagross faints. That leaves only Armaldo for the first time. I go for Surf with super effective damage, it does enough, and Steven Stone is defeated. In my first playthrough with it, Sharpedo gets a time of 2 hours, 19 minutes, and 3 seconds with 34 resets, 3 blackouts at level 73 with a game time of 7 hours and 24 minutes. Okay, these results are actually kind of close in a hilarious way. Look at this timeline graph. Sharpedo spent like a third of its time fighting Steven Stone. And this fight was so bad that it almost made it worse than Camerupt, although the Fire Ground type did end up getting a worst first playthrough time. Its Tate and Liza split actually ends up being on par with the Steven Stone split from Sharpedo's first run. If we look at the game time graphs, this is where things get interesting. Sharpedo and Camerupt were actually really close to each other throughout the mid game, but in the late game, starting at Tate and Liza, Camerupt really requires much more time. Until the end where the slope of Sharpedo's graph really increases because it needed a lot more training there. Level is also pretty interesting. You can see here my difference in approach with rare candies. I used them early on with Camerupt and then some later into the game, whereas with Sharpedo I tried to use them much later into the game because I had a slow growth rate. But I'm not sure I used them late enough, unless I missed some key strategy in defeating Steven Stone. What strategy could possibly be avoiding my detection, lurking in the deep waters like the shark from Jaws? Well, I said we'd come back around to Thief, and in the early game, Thief is not the choice. No, it might seem like a good idea to get Ice Beam a little bit earlier with Sharpedo, but that just doesn't really make sense. The strategy of thieving a bunch of nuggets seems like it makes sense with a bunch of Pokemon, but you do lose time by doing this. You have to take the boat back to Petalburg City from Slateport after obtaining Thief, and then yoink 4 nuggets from trainers. If you want to see me play this strategy uncut, go and check out my Cofadrigus stream that I did in October. Okay, now let's get into my second playthrough with Sharpedo and talk about what I did to optimize this thing. First of all, I think there are 3 potential strategies at the very end of the game. I'm going to talk about all of them, and some of them are absolutely amazing. The first one I'm going to do here is by far my favorite. It is so stylish. So here we go. The question of which level to face Roxanne at is a good one. I think 12 is pretty good because I'm able to 2-shot the Geodudes and 4-hit the Nose Pass. If I'm level 11, then I'm going to 5-hit the Nose Pass, which didn't seem like a good idea to me. At this level, I am just barely able to squeeze through and take a victory. Of course, like last time, I'm going to be skipping Brawly and heading straight for Watson. This is the section of the game where I'm going to do an extensive amount of training. I want to get to level 30 before taking on the Electric type Specialist. Now, technically level 32 is slightly better, but I want to show you the level 30 damage ranges first. Remember, with a slow growth rate, the extra training takes a lot of time. So at level 30, Crunch is going to one-hit both of the Voltorb and the Electrike. I am outspeeding all of Watson's Pokemon at this level, even with a speed negative nature. Note, I have gone for a Brave Nature once again, specifically because of my final strategy. So the Pokemon that are more complex are the Manectric and the Magneton. Manectric is likely going to use Thunder Wave to try to paralyze me, which I have a Cherry Berry for. I can 2-shot with Crunch and move on to the Magneton. If Static activates, it's likely that I'm going to lose because of how much damage Shockwave does. Manectric does between 61 and 73% damage, and Magneton does between 51 and 60% damage. In this battle, I get the worst outcome on the Manectric because Static activates, but then it gets the Magneton get the upside, which is I can lower special defense with Crunch. If this happens, then I'm going to 2-hit. If it doesn't, I only have a 14.5% chance to get the 2-hit. But if I lose here, I'm just going to black out and try the fight again. By repeating the battle, I consistently roll for good luck against Watson, and if I don't get good luck, then I'll level up. At 31, my odds to 2-shot the Magneton increase to 27.9%. And at level 32, they skyrocket up to an 81.5% chance. Now these chances are specifically just damage and critical hits. I am not factoring in the chance that I can lower special defense into these ranges, so all of them are slightly better, and that's why I thought that level 30 was an adequate level to start this fight at. In this, my second playthrough, I defeat Watson on my first attempt. Okay, another surprise, and a good one this time, so let's keep going. I've switched up my hidden power typing this time to go with hidden power rock. This is on the advice of Camerupt, who regularly posts results in my solo running Discord. After seeing his Sharpedo results, I stole his strategy, especially for the late game, as well as his hidden power typing to try it out. Alright, so what's the strategy for Norman? Well, I have to admit, I didn't really come into this with a robust understanding for the fight. I knew that I could thief the Citrus Berry from the Slacking after failing to one-hit the Spinda and using my Persim Berry. Then, with 2 more crunches, I'm gonna be able to knock out his ace. Plus, using special moves here means that counter can't do any damage to me, so if Slacking selects it, then I'm good to go. One thing about the AI, I believe it's the case that if you use a physical move prior to the Pokemon with counter coming in, then they are almost always going to select counter to try to counter that move. So using Secret Power, which is physical in Generation 3 to knock out the Spinda, allows me to bait the Slacking and knock it out. By the way, I had one reset here, it's because I didn't bait the Slacking in the first fight. I knocked out the Spinda with a special move, and then Slacking went for Facade and knocked out Sharpedo. I intend to go through these damage ranges later with my third Sharpedo playthrough, but for now let's move on. As was previously the case, before Tate and Liza, I am not going to use rare candies. I'm holding off as long as I can with Sharpedo. Another factor of this playthrough being a slow growth rate is that I have to collect extra rare candies, which take a lot of time. This one, I have to navigate this little area with the Acro Bike, and then I also need to fly over to Fall Arbor Town to pick up one on top of this waterfall. I'm drawing your attention to this footage because everyone who's watching in the background needs to look at the screen right now. I forgot to use a repel. Oops, I should use more repels so I don't waste time on wild encounters that are shiny. Okay, another surprise for this video. In this case, it is a shiny Meryl. And I have to say, it's kind of a green teal color. This is literally my favorite color. And Meryl is incredibly cute. It's this tiny little round like rabbit ball that's just so adorable, and it's my favorite color, and I love this shiny. However, I have a limited number of Pokeballs, and my Sharpedo will not be able to do damage without getting the knockout. So I had to throw Pokeball after Pokeball after Pokeball and just hope that the 10 remaining in my bag would be enough. And they are. I catch the shiny Meryl. I decide to nickname him Teal, and yes, this will be a solo playthrough later on, probably in 2025. There isn't time in my schedule to squeeze it in during this year. Okay, getting back on track, with 15 rare candies, I now head to the Elite Four with Sharpedo. Just like before, I use all of them before I go into the battle against Sydney, bringing Sharpedo up to level 67. My moveset throughout the league is straightforward. Return, Ice Beam, Surf, and Crunch. This is enough for Sydney, Phoebe, Glacia, and Drake. But then for Wallace, I'm going to change things up. Earthquake over Ice Beam, and Hidden Power Rock over Crunch. Now I end up having so many problems using this strategy against Wallace, I thought it was going to be enough, but it really isn't. I'm going to go back to the drawing board for this one with my third playthrough, but for now, let's continue with this run and talk about what I'm going to do against Steven Stone. Again, credit for this strategy goes to Aksu Karisora. I never would have come up with this myself, because it was truly lurking deep in the ocean, far below all of my biases and everything else. Okay, so get this. We are going to use Skull Bash to increase Sharpedo's defense stat against the Skarmory. Since it's a normal type move, it's not going to do very much damage, and I can repeatedly raise my defense, taking less damage every turn. Now this gets really wonky because I'm also going to be using Rage. So in Generation 3, remember, this move boosts your attack when you get hit while using Rage continuously. Unlike in Generation 1 though, I can just stop using Rage whenever I want and use Earthquake. So the goal is set up my defenses so that I can take more damage, then use Rest to heal, then use Rage to increase my attack stat, and finally unleash on Steven with Earthquake to knock out his Pokemon. Granted, I am going to have to use Skull Bash and Rage to knock out the Skarmory and the Claydol because they don't get hit by ground type moves. Now this set is genuinely hilarious. I never thought I'd be using Rage or Skull Bash in Generation 3, but here they are. That said, it has some downsides. If the Skarmory gets critical hits, things can fall apart. It's not an instant reset. Aerial Ace, which does the most damage to Sharpedo, does between 68 and 81% damage with a critical hit. Now the funny thing about this strategy is that while it seems like I have all the time in the world to set up, barring a critical hit, I actually don't. Steven is only going to use one full restore on the Skarmory. After that, every time I hit it with Skull Bash and do more and more damage, it's going towards the point where it faints, and I really don't want to take damage from Aggron's Thunder or its Solar Beam. So I have to ensure that I get set up on the Skarmory and then knock out the rest of his team with the setup that I get here. This means not pushing the Skull Bash setup too far. If I go beyond like +4, I'm probably going to knock out the Skarmory too soon with too little attack setup, and then the rest of the battle is going to be not possible. I have some resets here, and I had a lot on Wallace. Overall, this is a really imperfect run, but eventually I pull it off and I knock out the Skarmory with good setup. I have, with +4/+4, I'm able to one-shot the Aggron, one-shot the Cradily. I use a combination of Rage and Skull Bash to two-shot the Claydol. Earthquake takes care of the Metagross, as well as the final Armaldo. While the second run was quite imperfect, I still got a much better time. 1 hour, 43 minutes and 1 second, with 17 resets, 2 blackouts at level 70, with a game time of 5 hours and 46 minutes. Of course, I can do better with Sharpedo, so let's try this again. And then things go wrong for Sharpedo. I'm fighting Bug Maniac Angelo, the guy inside of Watson's gym who gives good experience yields. He needs art for the channel at some point. I'm fighting him regularly now. Anyways, his Volbeat causes issues because I try to knock it out with Rock Tomb to conserve Crunch PP. I don't know, it's frustrating. I just take the blackout here and then try Watson. This time I black out a total of 6 times, so that's a total of 7 in this playthrough before I defeat him. This is one of the things about Sharpedo that's a little bit dissatisfying. I'm very convinced it's the correct choice to fight Watson at level 30 and just hope for the win. Eventually you're going to get it by blackout training, but it's always a little bit dissatisfying when this has to be the answer, because sometimes you get results like this that just aren't very good. That said, a bunch of blackouts here makes the next section of the game easier, because by the time I arrive at Norman, I'm a higher level. At level 37, I have a much higher percentage chance to knock out the Spinda in a single hit. This means I move on to the Slacking with full health, deprioritizing it from going for things like Facade. Instead, it's going to prioritize things like Yawn. This can mess me up because sleep is really annoying, but when you're sleeping against a Slacking, usually things go your way. I do have 1 reset here, but then I emerge victorious. Okay, so what's my upgraded Wallace strategy? Well, it's kind of weird, it's not perfect, but I think it is the best thing to do if you want to have a consistent time against him. Return, Ice Beam, Rest, and Substitute. I am going to stall the Milotic out. Once it stops dealing significant damage, then the remaining Gyarados is far easier to manage. One thing you'll note about this strategy is that I'm no longer carrying Surf through the Elite Four like I mentioned before. I do think this is the correct way to play Sharpedo in the late game. Also, for this final playthrough, I am now running a Quiet Nature, fully leaning into the fact that mostly I'm going to be using special moves. And that remains the case against Steven Stone. While Rage and Skull Bash were really fun to do together, I don't think it's the best approach. I reverted to my original strategy, which is Surf, Ice Beam, Rain Dance, and Substitute. As long as the Skarmory doesn't break my sub, I can just do what I did before and have success. I survive Metagross's hit and knock out the Armaldo in a single turn. In my final playthrough with it, Sharpedo gets a time of 1 hour, 34 minutes, and 31 seconds, with 4 resets, 8 blackouts at level 73, with a game time of 5 hours and 54 minutes. Okay, so you might have thought it was strange when I was stalling out the Milotic, and I agree that strategy is not the ideal thing to do. If I went back to do this one more time, I would revert back to Hidden Power Electric. That said, I am by no means the best player with Sharpedo. Once again, Ike the Killer comes in and gets a fantastic time of 1 hour, 26 minutes, and 58 seconds. He is using a completely different third option for Steven Stone. Surf, Earthquake, Substitute, and Hidden Power Bug with a Quiet Nature. Honestly, it's pretty cool, but he has to overlevel to do this, level 76. I do think the Rain Dance strategy has the ability to go faster than this, provided it gets good RNG. But that's the thing about Sharpedo, I think there's a lot of variance for it. There's just so many areas where it can kind of fall apart for a variety of reasons. One thing I also want to mention is Axukarisora when using the Skull Bash Rage strategy. He actually got Pokerus. Wow, that's pretty amazing. So another really wild thing that is surprising about these runs. Okay, let's switch back over to Camerupt and see what I was able to do with its follow-ups. For this strategy, I need to give a huge shout out to Ike the Killer, who is a mastermind when it comes to using fire types in any Pokemon game. So thank you, Ike, for helping me out with one of the types that I struggle with the most. Now, speaking of struggling, Camerupt does not struggle in the early game. This thing is fantastic. It's one of those Pokemon that I say has the whiplash effect. In the early game, it's fantastic, and then in the late game, it just kind of falls apart. It is incredibly important, and I don't want to understate this, that you run a naive nature. If I had gone for anything else, Camerupt is going to finish the game at a significantly higher level. It is mandatory to outspeed specific Pokemon, and those are Drake's Flygon and Steven Stone's Metagross. So I have to finish the game with exactly 139 speed. Now, 141 would be nice to move first against the Claydol on Steven's team, but with the current strategy, that isn't required. I did a total of 3 follow-up playthroughs with Camerupt, and I'm going to show you only the final one, because it does the best job of illustrating my final strategy. Plus, it also shows some problems that can happen in the early game. One thing I found out early on is that it does not make sense to fight Brawly right away, so as soon as I deliver the letter to Steven Stone, I just talk to Mr. Briny and head to Slateport City. The reason that I have to do this is Brawly's Makuhita is level 19 and my Camerupt is only level 15. This is largely due to the fact that Camerupt does not struggle in the early game like I said before. Magnitude manages pretty much everything, and I have Ember for coverage whenever I need it. This does put Camerupt in a weird situation though, because when it's skipping Brawly, it's also skipping experience, and the rival is coming up before Mauville City. Having to face his Marshtomp is quite the obstacle when my Camerupt is underleveled, so I complete a bunch of training just north of Slateport City. My goal for this is level 20 so that I have decent magnitude rolls against the rival's team. I arrive at level 21, so let's look through these damage ranges. With magnitude 7, I have a 29.7% chance to one-shot the Lombre. This is kind of important because if it doesn't use Growl, then I am more advantaged against the Marshtomp later on. If I don't get hit by the attack lowering move, then I have a 100% chance to one-shot the Marshtomp when I roll magnitude 7 or higher. If I level up to 22, then you'll see that with magnitude 7 I have an 82.4% chance to one-shot the Lombre, which would allow me to avoid Growl more consistently. Honestly, I don't think leveling up more here makes a ton of sense. We would have to roll good magnitudes, so really what I'm looking for here is a good magnitude against the Lombre and then against the Marshtomp. If I don't get them, then this fight is likely going to be a loss. Luckily for me with my current strategy, I only have roughly 15 minutes on the clock when I get to this battle, sometimes less as is the case here. That means restarting the entire run if I get exceptionally unlucky here is a possibility. Although, by the time I was doing my 4th playthrough with Camerupt, I was kind of over this thing and I didn't really want to reset. So I took a total of 4 resets here against the rival before I defeated him. This is the only battle in the early game that is tricky for Camerupt. It stomps everything in the next section of the game up until Norman. But I want to talk about what happens after Watson. So every trainer that I come across, I am basically going to battle from here on out. My goal is to get to level 37 before taking on Norman. This gives Camerupt access to Earthquake, which is incredibly important. Without it, Norman is inconsistent because I'm either relying on magnitude hits or 2 hits with a move like Rock Slide, which has bad accuracy. Here are the damage ranges at level 37. The real issue here is that the Vigoroth and Linoone outspeed Camerupt, so it's constantly taking hits, and then it will take hits from the Slacking as well. Earthquake allows me to one-shot all of his team members except the Slacking, which is going to go down to likely 3 hits. I think what you want to focus on is how much damage Facade does from the Slacking. 37 to 44% damage. Even though this thing isn't attacking every turn, if I'm going to take 4 to 5 hits to knock it out with another move like Rock Slide or Ember, or maybe chancing things with magnitude, then I'm going to get hit by at least 2 Facades, and that puts me in a losing position if I've been hit by the Vigoroth and the Linoone. So for this one, I have to train, grinding on all of the trainers in the next section of the game, including Brawly, and that gets me to level 37 before I take on Norman. With Earthquake, he is very simple. Okay, let's talk about the mid-game. Now, you might think it's an omission from me not buying the TM for Flamethrower, because I can collect enough high-priced items in the section of the game around Mauville City to get access to this TM before I face Maxi. But this is not actually an omission. I chose not to do that. The reason is, I think it takes more time than it's worth. The best fire-type move that Camerupt learns is Eruption, and I am going to use it extensively once I reach level 45, and I can rely on Rock Slide for Winona. This next section of the run is perhaps the most unsatisfying for Camerupt. Because it needs to finish the game with 139 speed at level 78, I can't use my rare candies before Tate and Liza, which puts me in a tricky position because they're actually quite scary. The Claydol has Earthquake, and the other Pokemon can put me to sleep, raise their special attack, and attack with moves like Psychic, which still do good damage. This is where Ike the Killer comes in and helps us out, because because he chose to go with Hidden Power Bug for Camerupt. At first, this doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I have never used Hidden Power Bug before in a serious way on the channel, so this is its first outing. But it's actually quite good here because it gives me super effective damage against the Lunatone and the Soul Rock. The Claydol and the Xatu both take neutral damage from bug type moves, but I have another solution for them. This is where we need to get into the nitty-gritty of the double battle against Tate and Liza. So in my challenges, early on in the history of the channel, I always caught myself a Magikarp and used that during the double battle to initiate it with this gym leader, because you have to have at least 2 Pokemon in your party in order to start the battle. Since then, I have evolved away from this strategy, allowing me to take one of my HM users into the battle since it just gets knocked out on the first turn, just like Magikarp. But for that reason, I don't allow myself to take in an HM user that has the ability Levitate or is a flying type, because that Pokemon will avoid damage from the Claydol's Earthquake. Because of that, I can give myself weird advantages where the Claydol will choose Ancient Power instead of going for Earthquake depending on which solo Pokemon I have. The reason is their AI likes to target the Pokemon that they can knock out first. So if they see I have a really weak Tailo, then the Claydol is going to be like, Ancient Power that thing because I want to knock it out first turn. And then I won't get hit by Earthquake with my Camerupt, meaning I have more health to deal exceptional damage with Eruption. I ran into some problems trying this fight at level 53 or 54, which was Ike the Killer's suggestion. This is because Camerupt starts outspeeding the Xatu at that level. Now, Ike the Killer was assuming that he's going to one-shot the Xatu and the Claydol will Ancient Power the Tailo. If that's the case, then he'll have maximum damage from Eruption 2 turns in a row. But for me, where I mandate that I take in a Zigzagoon or a Pokemon that is analogous to Magikarp, I do not have this same advantage. I'm going to get hit by damage from Earthquake, so my second Eruption won't do as much. For that reason, I think it makes more sense to be a slightly higher level, 55 or 58 if you want to be really safe. The problem with this is you start to run out of trainers that give good experience yields training past level 54. You can see here that I arrive at Tate and Liza just before level 55, and I decided to face them because there is a chance that I can win at this level. With a full HP Eruption, I have a 53% chance to one-hit the Xatu. If that happens, I will definitely win, but if I don't, I still have a chance. I can use Eruption on the second turn to knock out the Claydol because I don't do enough damage with my first hit. Using Eruption again brings the Xatu down to lower HP, and then from there, I have to target their Pokemon in a very specific order. First of all, Xatu to knock it out so that it doesn't do any damage to me because it's taken time to set up usually, then Lunatone to avoid Hypnosis, and finally the Soul Rock, which does take 2 turns, but with Hidden Power Bug, I pull it off. The footage you saw just here makes the fight look really easy. I assure you, it is not always this easy. If the Claydol is somehow able to survive 2 hits and you don't knock it out, and it uses a second Earthquake, there is almost a 0% chance that you win. Every time that scenario played out, I lost, so I learned that if ever the Claydol attacks twice with Earthquake, I'm just going to reset the game and save my time. Getting through this battle right away doesn't make the end game easier though, because Juan is next. Notice while I'm solving the ice puzzles that my speed is 102. His Kingdra has 106 speed, and I need to move first against it if I want this battle to be consistent. You might be wondering if it is possible to just luck through the Kingdra, having it use double team on the first turn, and then knocking it out with a favorable damage roll at a lower level like 57. It's also a good question to ask, do you survive a Water Pulse at this high level? And the answer is yes, Water Pulse does between 64 and 75% damage, but Earthquake only does between 87 and 103% damage at level 60. That's over 2 damage rounding thresholds. So I think the outspeed on Kingdra is needed here, and for that reason I use 3 rare candies, bringing Camerupt up to level 60 before I try the battle. Then things are really easy provided you don't miss because the Kingdra's double team. Okay, before the league I have one really important thing to do, and that is going back to the move reminder to teach Rock Slide in the place of Hidden Power Bug. I forgot this in one of my attempts, and the run is basically impossible if you do. I have to have Rock Slide in order to make Drake manageable later into the league, and really, he's the first league member that's a problem. I'll go through Glacia though, just because you might be worried about her water type moves, but you really shouldn't be. I haven't even used extra rare candies before this battle. The reason is I can set up my substitute on the first Celio. From there I knock it out and move on to the Wall Rain, which then my substitute tanks the damage from Surf, and with 2 hits I'm able to knock it out. From there I just one-hit everything that's remaining. Okay, Drake's next. This is where I'm going to use my rare candies, going up from level 64 to 76. It seems like this is over leveling, but really it isn't. If you finish the game lower than level 78, Camerupt falls into a world of pain. Everything doesn't work, and yeah, it's always really disappointing. It feels like this Pokemon walks a tightrope or a knife's edge to get a successful victory in the late game. Over level 78, it has a very easy time, as I am about to demonstrate, but under level 78, everything falls apart. The reason I'm using my rare candies before Drake is because I want favorable damage ranges against the Flygon. It's going to break my substitute with Earthquake, and I don't want to take another hit from it, so that's why I want the outspeed here. Then Eruption even after my substitute can get the 2-shot. Kingdra is next. This is another reason I need a high level. If you look at Earthquake's damage range against it, I do between 103 and 122% damage at level 76. This is just barely a guaranteed one-hit. If I was a lower level and the Kingdra survives, it would then hit me with Surf, doing between 83 and 97% damage. The reason that's problematic is because I'm not going to one-hit the Salamence, and I only have a 63.6% chance to one-hit the Altaria using Rock Slide. Ensuring that I one-hit the Kingdra just gives me a higher probability of winning the fight overall when my odds aren't good against the Altaria and the Salamence. But if I do one-shot the Kingdra, then my odds against the Altaria and the Salamence are very good, and this fight feels very easy. Okay, it's time for Wallace, and this is the battle that I'm sure all of you have been wondering about. Once again, Ike the Killer's solution of Hidden Power Bug is very useful here. At level 76, Camerupt has an 82.4% chance to one-hit the Wailord at the beginning of the battle. Either way, this is a good thing. If I do get the one-hit, then I move on to his next Pokemon, which is Tentacruel, and I just one-shot it. But if I didn't get the one-hit, then I could just set up Substitute for free while Wallace uses a full restore. I am not going to need Eruption for this battle because I have Hidden Power Bug to one-shot the Ludicolo. Although that's not a guarantee, I only have an 88.3% chance to knock it out. If it hits with Surf, it does between 87 and 103% damage, so I do not want it to attack, especially if I've taken some chip damage from the Wailord's Water Spout. I tried this battle at level 73 to see if it was possible because Wallace's Pokemon aren't very fast. And believe me, without these damage ranges, it really isn't. I want to confidently be knocking these Pokemon out, especially because I'm going to need level 78 for Steven Stone. Beyond that, against the Wishcash, I have a 64.8% chance to knock out with Earthquake, a guaranteed one-hit on the Milotic, and then against the Gyarados, I have to two-shot using Rock Slide. If we look at the damage ranges here, you'll see that Rock Slide does enough damage to one-shot, but that's before Intimidate. After Intimidate, it's going to get the two-hit, provided I don't miss. That's another reason I like to make this fight as consistent as possible on the earlier Pokemon, because there's a chance that I fail against the Gyarados and waste a bunch of time. I want to ensure that every time I fight Wallace, I'm making it back here to the final Pokemon of the battle to try my odds. Okay, before Steven Stone, notice I'm level 77 with 137 speed. This is one less than Metagross. So I go into the Safari Zone and collect one more rare candy to level up to 78, getting 139 speed. Well, that was the plan, but I have slightly too few speed EVs because I didn't train to level 55 for Tate and Liza. So yeah, I only have 138 speed. At least I'm tied with the Metagross though. If I move first, I'm going to have a favorable time in this fight. The answer is so simple: Sunny Day and Eruption. I set up Substitute, then I set up Sunny Day, and then I spam Eruption. It's gonna one-hit the Skarmory, the Aggron, and the Metagross. Those are his first three Pokemon. I get the outspeed on the Metagross, and here's why that's critical. If it uses Earthquake and breaks my Substitute, then the Claydol that outspeeds can set up Light Screen, survive an Eruption, and attack with Earthquake, dealing massive damage. And once I've taken damage, then Eruption is going to deal significantly less to every one of Steven Stone's Pokemon. For this reason, it is possible to bring in Fire Blast into this fight in the place of Hidden Power Bug, just so you still have a good Fire-type move to use in the remainder of the fight. But I don't really like that strategy. This one is good enough. If I have the outspeed on the Metagross, then I have the Substitute for Claydol, and if it takes 2 turns to knock out, that's fine. In this case though, the Claydol chooses Reflect, so it doesn't get its defenses boosted, and then Eruption one-hits. I re-establish Sunny Day on the Armaldo, protected by my Substitute, and from there, 2 more Eruptions, finishing off Steven Stone. And here is another surprise! I clock in with a final Camerupt time of 1 hour, 20 minutes, and 20 seconds, with 5 resets, 0 blackouts at level 79, with a game time of 5 hours and 5 minutes. Okay, I didn't expect these results. Camerupt did brilliantly, and that's perfect because before I rank it, I need to talk about the sponsor of this video, Brilliant. If you don't know, it's a platform where you learn by doing with thousands of interactive lessons in in math, data analysis, programming, and AI. The lessons are designed to be uniquely effective with a first principles approach, helping you to build understanding from the ground up. You'll develop critical thinking skills through problem solving. Brilliant also helps you develop a powerful daily learning habit. And it's even easier to learn now with their new mobile experience. After watching my videos, you might be curious about coding, so their Applied Python programming course can help you understand code, and believe me, doing so has leveled up my life and content in so many ways over the last few years. Now, something I've learned while developing my understanding of code is that a strong foundation in mathematics also really helps when creating software, especially when delving into the horrors of Pokemon disassemblies. Brilliant has you covered here. They have math courses in algebra, geometry, calculus, and more. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for 30 days, visit brilliant.org/scotsthoughts or scan the QR code on screen. You can also click the link in the description. Now let's get back to what I was going to say about Camerupt. Okay, I didn't expect this. Camerupt actually completely destroys Sharpedo. I think I could get Sharpedo's time down a little bit more, but the inconsistencies around Watson are just not what Camerupt has to deal with. It does walk a knife's edge, but it does it quite consistently outside of the rival before Mauville City. That's really the only battle where I'm rolling the dice. So I guess Fire-type fans rejoice because today Camerupt wins in the region that had too little water. This overall has been a very surprising video to put together. We had Rage and Skullbash both get used, a shiny get captured, and then the underdog come through with what is a surprising win. Just for reference, if you want to see how dominant Camerupt is, let's check out the game time graph. It is faster than Sharpedo in its final playthrough throughout the entire run. If we look at all the timeline graphs for all of Sharpedo's playthroughs, you can see that there is a major improvement between run number 1 and run number 2, but then only a modest one between 2 and 3. For Camerupt, things are similar, but exaggerated. It had an absolutely massive improvement between run number 1 and run number 2, and then modest improvements from there. One thing I do want to note here is if I only did 3 playthroughs with Camerupt, it still would have got a better time than Sharpedo doing 3 runs. So with the same number of runs, it also outcompetes. If you wonder or you think it's unfair that I sometimes do different numbers of runs with each Pokemon, I get that feedback, but I do value my time, and I don't always want to do more playthroughs with a Pokemon if I don't think I can significantly improve the results without just getting much better luck. In this case, the reason I did more playthroughs with Camerupt is just because I wasn't playing the strategy well when I did it in number 2 and number 3. I finally feel like I reached the potential of the strategy in run number 4 from my own player execution. Whereas with Sharpedo, I think there's just much less that I could improve as a player. I encourage any of you to try these strategies yourself and see how these Pokemon do for you. I would be very surprised if you found a different result with Sharpedo being more consistent than Camerupt. I just don't think that's going to happen. If you want to copy my strategies, here are the run summaries so you can see both of them. At the top of the screen, we have Camerupt's route that I used in its 4th playthrough, and in the middle, kind of bottom area of the screen, not including the credits of course, we have Sharpedo's run that I used in its 3rd playthrough. This is the strategy finishing the game with Rain Dance, but just in case you want to see the other one, let's take away Camerupt's results, and we're going to show Sharpedo with the Skullbash Rage strategy, just in case you want to try that out, because it is really fun. Okay, tier list time, and we're going to start with the first playthrough tier list. Sharpedo's time of 2 hours 19 minutes and 3 seconds earns itself a placement behind Roselia in the C tier. Camerupt's time of 2 hours 26 minutes and 24 seconds earns itself a placement just behind Breloom and Dusclops near the top of the D tier, where a whole bunch of Pokemon are clustered currently. Although some of them, like Blaziken specifically, deserve much better results. Like S-tier good results. Blaziken is an absolute beast. I'm looking forward to playing it again in December. Switching over to my second playthrough tier list, I do want to mention that the thresholds right now are all kinds of wonky. I really need to rebalance them in the start of 2025. Leaving them intact though, Sharpedo earns itself a placement in the B tier just behind Glalie. And Camerupt earns itself an S-tier placement behind Breloom and Jirachi, and hilariously ahead of Mewtwo. You might think this is weird. Scott, are the results from Mewtwo stale? It got a time of 1 hour 22 minutes and 10 seconds, and yes, I have learned a lot since I played it at the beginning of 2024, but its results aren't that old. I eventually think Mewtwo will outcompete Camerupt and get a higher placement, but it's not going to go that much further, just because at the beginning of the game it starts with only Psychic type moves for damage, and it has to fight Calvin's Poochyena, which is a Dark type. That really holds the legendary back. I'll try it again in the future, but for now I think we can all admit that Camerupt got a very impressive placement. Okay, so So from here, we are going into daily December releases for Emerald version, and there are going to be some legendaries, which are similar to the Reggies in some way. Then we are going to get a unique video and a first ever for the channel. And beyond that, of course, I'm going to redo the starters. So I think December is going to be a really great month. Thank you so much if you support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships. It really does mean the world to me. Now, if you've made it this far, you are incredible. I will see you in my next video.